especially in sort of an economic way
I think
of
it's
things
Right now,
that
the
you,
YouTube site is also frozen,
awesome.
so they're trying to figure that out.
of things you folks have
I don't
seen.
know exactly what that means for everybody,
Anything
but I know
getting any
that.
better? I mean, I know they
Yeah.
extended mortgage
says
and rent things,
resource
but
limit is
like that
reached.
whole automobile thing where everyone wanted
Maybe we're
like
wicked popular.
We overloaded the system.
yeah.
Thousands, whether a thousand out of that. Wait a minute. And that's because the person doing the position didn't have.
That's good, yeah.
So people just unmuted and were just black.
Really.
No, this was the pre. This was the pre-meeting.
You're right, yeah, you're right, because of, yeah, they might not come back at all.
Mute all. It was not muted all.
We were expecting this type of crowd. Why don't we have someone come in to?
Well,
do
you're right,
makeup
the
then?
tenant can easily walk away. I mean, even if he owed money or whatever, he should.
Right. My
But
phone just
it's
kept
the
going.
person with the building, with the assets.
Send me screenshots.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't
And you
want
can't,
everybody to look at my phone.
yeah, and you can't, as a bank, keep a bunch of buildings. Yeah. Do you cover a lot of areas of the, you know, the different markets with
Oh,
lending?
the
and-
mics
or
are
is it
still on
mostly?
live, though. They're getting it on cable.
All right.
Your mics are on.
All right, so the mics are on.
I remember you mentioned that. You got like a uniqueness to your bank.
Steven. Because it's coming through cable now.
So they can hear us on the cable station.
Yep.
I was doing a short economic interview.
Everyone, your mics are hot, remember.
Oh, my God.
Talking about the weather, that's about it. It's gonna rain tomorrow?
It's all Josh's fault.
We, I think we got a streak of good weather.
YouTube is
So
back up.
everything is live right now. For those people hearing us, thank you. YouTube is back up. We'll gather again in a minute, and we'll move forward from there.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that are hearing us live, one of the reasons we are not having the meeting the public can attend is because per the governor's office, you can't have a meeting with more than 25 people, and we are at that right at the moment. One of the reasons, if we had even got less than 25 and we had more people from the public show up, who would be allowed to come in and who wouldn't be in order to get us to 25. So, as soon as these requirements are changed, we would be more than happy to have a public meeting with public input, but right at the moment, as you know, through the governor's office, we're allowed to have 25 people maximum, so that may answer some questions that people have of why we aren't having the public in. As soon as we can do that, we'll be more than happy to. Bless you.
No, I said we're going to rejoin in a minute because YouTube's back up live and they can hear us, so we might as well proceed. That's just the assistant saying that, though.
You want to continue on, Jeff? Go ahead.
Hey, Jeff, you have this, are you controlling the slides?
Yes.
I think you're one behind. I think.
One behind?
I think you need to advance one more.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to, okay.
You were going through the 107.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Really?
I forget when I have to multitask.
I'm following along.
So Bob, are we back? Official? Gavel me in? All right, sorry for the technical delay. I'm glad we can work that out. One of the pieces here on this slide is remote learning. We all know will never take the place of in-school learning for our teachers. We want to get as much seat time. I think it's important academically and social emotionally for each student to be in a classroom as best we can in a safe environment. One of the things I will talk about later on, if a parent chooses to go remote for their student, for health, safety, whatever they feel the need for their child to go remote, we will be using a learning management system. It won't be Whitman Hanson teachers that will be teaching those students who go fully remote, unless the district then goes remote. And again, I'll get into some of that later on, but we just don't have the staff to do either an in-person model or a hybrid model, and then take a group of students and then have Whitman Hanson teachers do a remote teaching experience. We will be looking at a way for those students who are on the learning management system as Desi has provided us a list of vendors to access their classroom. I don't know how yet, but we still want them connected to the school community. One of the questions that I wanted to put out and get some answers, or the public to see, because people have asked me a lot about the hybrid, even before, because I think folks knew, okay, remote, we're going to be home, in person, it can be 3 feet or 6 feet, that was discussion, but what about the hybrid? So we've talked a little bit about, or a lot about, what model of hybrid would work for us. And again, this isn't an endorsement of what the school committee, and we can pivot as we go. But a hybrid would be, we would have 2 cohorts of kids, K through 12. Cohort A would meet Monday, Tuesday. Cohort B would meet Thursday, Friday. And all students would be on a remote day on Wednesday. And teachers would be teaching both cohorts or splitting up their cohorts, whatever, it would be up to the teacher to touch base during that day on Wednesday for kids. Virtual Wednesdays for staff. Staff reports to the building just as normal, staff responsibilities, virtual learning for their cohorts, prep their classes, understand staff's going to have an additional task of preparing assignments, teaching assignments, learning activities for students on their remote day, planning, and then that'll be our PLC time, our faculty meeting time, our special ed meetings that have to take place. Even in a hybrid, what I'm proposing to the committee and to the community is pre-K and K will attend all week, meaning that if you sign up for full day K or if you're in half day K, you're attending school all week, and our pre-K full day and half day students would attend all week. Our special populations, and Lauren will get into this a little bit later, our special populations of kids as deemed by their IEPs as appropriate will come to school in both cohorts and have a half day on Wednesday. They'll be in their self-contained class, whatever their need is. They will be in both cohorts in this hybrid model, and they will attend all 5 days with a half day on Wednesday. Why we talked a little bit about hybrid in this plan, Chris?
If I just had just for clarification, so say for example, you're in cohort A, your full day, Monday, Tuesday, you're doing online learning on Wednesday?
Correct.
Thursday, Friday?
Correct.
Okay.
And that'll look a little bit different when I get into
Okay.
what that hybrid might look for us. But this was just something I put out to the community.
Yep.
Because the overwhelming conversation was, well, what is the hybrid? What does it look like? I heard week on, week off. We actually looked at cohort A coming in the morning, cohort B coming in the afternoon. Transportation, we physically are going to have an issue transporting kids anyway, but trying to transport 2 cohorts in a day. George, what did you say? They'd start on a bus ride at 6:05, and the last bus would close up at 6:45 p.m.
Yes.
Because we'd be doing multiple runs every day. So why did we choose hybrid or choose this? What does it mean to have a hybrid? The health and safety of our students, better ability to transport. We do have a lack of space, staffing, and funding is better, but if we chose to go fully with a full in-person at 6 feet, we wouldn't have adequate funding to do that. Our internal pressure test, which we had to do by the state, our class sizes are too large across the district at 6 feet to go full-time, and this is just a dad and an honest opinion. I thought 3 feet was too close, and so did my colleague, Mr. Farrow, when we sat next to each other, both in the Performing Arts Center and in a classroom. We thought 3 feet was too close, so we will shoot for 6. 90% of our classes will probably have 6 or maybe a little bit more. Some might have 5, but 3 feet was just too close for us. And Wednesdays in the hybrid will allow a fully robust virtual plan to be utilized by staff and students in real time so they can connect. We can do some of our social emotional learning, and that is separate from the remote learning plan.
Can I
Yes,
ask
Fred.
a quick question? Just going back to full day K,
Yep.
are we going to be able to offer the full day K product with transportation, et cetera? Without missing a beat and expecting it to go 5 days a week?
Right now, Karen says yes. So my boss, Karen, said, yeah, we can do the full day K piece, even with the afternoon, or even with the afternoon pickup and drop off with half day. she said we can do the full day piece if we chose to do that. And on Wednesdays, there's gonna be just a few people on the bus. But I'm gonna say, when I talk transportation too, I'm really going to ask parents if they can actually drive their students, carpool, family, whatever, to limit the bus if we can. And there was a question about hybrid, and again, I'll get into it a little bit more. We will cohort students by family, so that if you have 4 kids, all your kids will be in cohort A, so you can adequately plan for your week. You know your kids will be in cohort A, then you know that they'll be off on Wednesday at home on Thursday, and home on Friday. So, I'm not going to go, this next slide I think is from DESE. Folks can read up on everything on DESE. If you check out the DESE website, there's a whole area on COVID. And this is all the data that we brought together, all the recommendations, guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and also Mass DPH. Our boards of health have been very, very helpful to Lisa, but have been more like, follow DPH guidelines, you're doing a good job. This is what we're recommending, and keep doing what you're doing. So.
So right now, what's going to happen is Jeff's going to give you a little bit more information on the actual specific things we had to do. DESE required, again, like those 3 plans. We sent in those plans. This is a detailed explanation of those plans. If I could also, if you think in your mind, or if you're listening online to the graphic organizer, that was the very first slide, we are asked to sort of do the impossible. We've talked to everybody we've talked to is, this is brand new, this is different, but it can be done. Because if it's done, and when it's done, and it's done well, then you're going to have something that's great. So that's what we're moving to. That's the mindset we hopefully have. And that first slide, which was that graphic organizer, then becomes the 10-day approach that we get to have at the beginning of the school year before students come in, so that we can move forward collectively together, answer those questions, and proceed in a uniform manner. I'm the fill-in. Jeff's back, and he's going to continue.
Thanks, George. So I'm going to actually, because folks don't have this document at home, and I don't know how well they can read it on their cable screen or their virtual screen, so I'm going to read it because I think it's important for folks to know what we actually sent in or our thoughts to the department. So over the last month, members of the WHRSD facility staff assessed each classroom using a 3-foot distance between student chairs, which was deemed appropriate by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The square footage of classrooms was calculated, and graphs and charts were generated that showed how many desks would fit, based strictly upon space into each available classroom and area. This pressure test was completed across the district. Using the DESE 3-foot model, the number of student desks varied greatly when egress for doorways and storage openings were taken into account. Although the number was in the 20s on average, it was deemed not feasible in many areas due to class size projections for students. When using the Center for Disease Control, CDC, 6-foot distance between student chairs, average class sizes across the districts would allow for at least 15 desks per room, with proper egress calculated into that. The administration, in concert with the district COVID team, the WHEA, and the school-based COVID teams, decided for a myriad of reasons the district should move towards the 6-foot distance as best as the room configuration would allow. While many classrooms will be arranged at 6 feet to begin with, the goal is to get as close to 6 feet as possible and move away from 3. The health and safety of our students and staff was paramount in this decision. The 6-foot model allows for a typical classroom movement that happens daily in all classrooms, while maintaining at least the DESE recommended 3-foot space during such movement. Using a 6-foot model, the district does not have the resources in the form of space and personnel to accomplish this goal daily for the entire student population. In conjunction with health and safety and resource scarcity, the WHRSD has transportation implications that hinder a full return. The WHRSD is obligated by current legislation to transport a large percentage of students to school. The recent COVID restrictions for busing do not allow the district to accomplish this daily. The district does not have the buses, drivers, or time during the day to accomplish all the additional bus runs that would need to take place for the whole district's student population daily. With a cap on buses of 24 for a 72-passenger bus, transportation presents an ongoing challenge. In conclusion, after careful consideration, a full in-person return for the school committee is not our recommendation under the current conditions for the WHRSD. The district does not have enough resources in the form of physical space, human capital, and fiscal holdings to accomplish this in a safe and efficient manner. So that's part one of our 3 plans. Oops, I have. Yeah, tell Joe. So remote learning. So we transition to remote learning. This is what's going to be different from what we saw in March to June. The hours of remote learning, if the district chooses to go to remote, elementary school would go from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. 8 to 12 would be teaching, student interaction. Middle school, we're looking at a 9 to 2 model with 9 to 1 teaching. High school, a 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. with 10 to 2 teaching. The feedback we received from especially the older students, the later we could go, the better. They were more engaged in the afternoon than they were in the morning. I see Mr. Forth shaking his head. I think he agrees with that, right? What we're looking for staff is a 35 hours a week, 20 hours of actively engaged teaching with students, 5 hours of prep, 5 hours of school meetings, PLC, faculty, and our stat teams, an hour of parent caregiver communications, and 2 hours of IEP and 504 parent meetings as applicable. We're going to be looking at using Google Classroom and Google Meet. We're going to branch away from Zoom, so all teachers will be using one student learning process. Last year, the feedback we received was too many people were too scattered, so we're looking at Google Classroom and Google Meet. Secondary teachers will be teaching their scheduled classes, prep and attendance will be taken via Infinite Campus. Elementaries will be teaching 4 hours a day, including morning meeting. The SEL time is critical for us, and academic time. They can break into small groups in the remote plan as deemed by the teacher. Elementary will be using iReady, which is math, and InterReading, which is our online English platform, which we're introducing this September if we decided to go remote. The daily expectations for students should not exceed 7 hours. Teacher interaction and extended lesson work, like homework, we're not going to, the goal isn't to crush kids if they're at home on remote learning. Assessments will be given on a variety of methods with advance notice. To the extent feasible and permitted by governance staff will report to the buildings. We're working with the association to do that. Our goal would be teachers report to work in school unless we're under a quarantine. And that would be for hybrid, that would be for full remote. Specialized programs in a remote setting would stay in person unless the governor shuts us down. So those special education populations, I talked about hybrid, 5 days a week, would come to school for remote learning. And then just this last piece is athletics. Just let the committee know we're going to work with the association. If athletics are canceled because of remote, whatever, we're going to work out a stipend potentially so coaches who are working with teams can get some compensation if we end up in a remote setting.
I think it's important in this that we realize that this remote setting is when the whole district is remote. This is different than the learning management system remote option that parents may have in any situation, in any option that's chosen by the school committee. This is when we're all not coming in, when all students are not coming into the building. So there is a distinction.
So could you talk about that a little bit more? So the learning management system.
Correct.
Right? So I'm looking at it from a family perspective. So I have a student, let's say choose not to send them. So now they're on the learning management system.
Correct.
So that's one option, if you could touch on that. The other option would be my child gets sick. So now they need to be home.
Correct.
Because they can't go with their cohort on whatever day it is. So would they be in the learning management system? And I guess what I'm really looking to understand is the transition back and forth between the learning management system.
Sure.
Which it sounds like may not be kind of with their teacher.
Yes.
And then back into the remote.
Okay, so if we look at the learning management system first, the learning management system is a company-based product. One of the people we're looking at is Ingenuity. We already use that at the secondary level. They do have also a K-5 piece. If a parent were to choose that option, their student would get their learning via that choice, so that Ingenuity choice. It would be overseen from an implementation standpoint by a Whitman Hanson Regional School District personnel. But it is self-paced, and you move forward in that. That is one option. If you are coming, now, if we're in a hybrid situation and your child gets sick, they're still part of their cohort, they still have interaction with their teacher on Wednesday in a virtual setting, Thursday and Friday also, if they were in that cohort A, other 2 days if they're in cohort B. And then they would return to the setting when the time comes that they're no longer ill. There is also an option that Desi has put forward, and Jeff went over it in the first slide, that says that a parent may choose to choose to be hybrid, and then say, this really isn't for me, I think I want to go to remote. There's the other way. A parent would choose from remote back into the school. One of the things we're trying to work on with the union and with parents and with you eventually is that, can we put some time constraints on maybe when those things happen? So that if a child wants to enter from remote into now the virtual or the hybrid situation, would it be at the quarter mark, at the 45-day mark when it's a progress report? And would it have to be at a 2-week mark previous to you telling us, so that we can make sure from a health perspective everyone is safe and fine? So yes, there are choices that parents can utilize in between a full learning management LMS remote system and the hybrid or remote that we offer, which is run by Whitman Hanson Regional School District. There is the ability to move and cross in between that, but what we will be seeking from them is the ability to let us know for two weeks prior, and then at specific points based on progress reports or marking periods throughout the year, so that the community of learners who are learning in a hybrid or the community of learners who are learning in a remote, both sides have the ability to plan properly.
So as a follow-up, that helps, thank you. So, and I really like the 2-week or whatever. There needs to be some.
Yes.
Yeah, transitional. There has to be a transitional phase, I
I would
think.
to think about maybe that first transition being a little shorter than maybe subsequent, because I think you'll have some folks that might try something for a
Sure.
couple weeks or a week, and then be like, okay, this
Yeah.
isn't gonna work.
Yep.
But getting back to what you just kind of laid out for the plan, if we look at the, if we look at the remote option, or hybrid option rather.
Yep.
The hybrid option. Are you gonna we're gonna have some people that are just gonna get sick, and they're not gonna come to school in their cohort, that's just gonna happen. Are you gonna monitor that, and then at some point, you're gonna reach a critical mass where you're gonna be like, we have enough people out where that's where you would make the decision to
Yep,
go
so-
full remote in that particular instance?
It'll depend. So, for instance, my daughter breaks her leg. She can't come to school for
Right,
2
that's
weeks,
different.
whatever,
Right.
she's in a wheelchair.
Right.
So she's gonna be like, she's absent from school. We'll give her the assignments that she would have been doing in class. Now, if we have a decent remote plan, she can actually log in on those remote days and have her connections to school. If that student goes out with long-term illness, we might counsel that family into saying, you're in better shape because you're not attending school, to use our remote learning platform outside of school, so they can progress in their education piece of that. I think if we have an extended absence, we've done that with Ingenuity now, with students in the high school who can't come to school for a variety of reasons. The tutoring piece isn't great, so we moved them over to Ingenuity.
Right, so that makes sense. I'm envisioning flu season, and all of a sudden, you got half the kids that aren't coming in there, whether they're in
So-
cohort A or B. That's where you could
Right.
make a determination.
You could make a determination based on, how many kids are available to come to school in a hybrid situation for a variety of health reasons. Then you have the ability to say, okay, maybe it's the metrics because there's a COVID spike, maybe it's because there's a bad flu season. Then we would say, if we choose to move fully remote, that's when our teachers take over, that's when we do that. And then that would be the option for those who are on Ingenuity who'd like to come back in, they may, and then we would proceed from there. But there is fluidity within every choice.
If we go on the learning management system, Ingenuity or Teka, we pay by the student.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes and no. Depending on what choice you choose, depending on what school you choose. So there are different options where if you go with the Greenfield Community School or you go with Teka, which is a Massachusetts virtual learning sponsored thing, that they have their own teachers, their own section, you pay by student. Unless you get X number and you pay a larger figure and then they take it off. If you go with something like Ingenuity, you can pay by student should you want the massive bundle, or you can pay just by subscription, so you give them X amount of money, you get X amount of availability so you can design the classes that individual students need.
We have kids already on TECA. We already have, we have about a half dozen students attending TECA now in the district. And they're labeled as choice students.
Yeah,
I don't know if
and
they will be, if parents choose to do that now, they can. I believe there's a waiting list for TECA right now, and there's a waiting list for Greenfield. We have a relationship with Ingenuity right now. We're familiar with the product. We would have local control. For instance, as we get into that, again, I want to get it, don't want to dive in too deep, but we will have teacher control. So if David's in a class with Dawn, and they're both in Algebra 1, and David needs some extra help, or Dawn needs some extra help, the teacher can go in and manipulate the lessons and the assignments that the student has to do at their own pace. And on Ingenuity, a teacher is actually online, not ours, but theirs, and it's self-paced and self-assessed. The benefit for Ingenuity, or this online, if a parent does that, they can do their school at 7 o'clock at night. They can do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. They don't have to stick within the remote day. If we choose to go remote, it will be a structured schedule. So if it works for a family that they want to go into their own remote, they're going to lose the connections at some point to our school. A teacher will oversee it who's maybe not able to come to school from us. They'll oversee it, but we can actually manipulate the curriculum and the assignments to the ability level of that student and make sure that they're not just banging their head against the wall and keep failing the assessments. And the assessments have a certain point that you have to gain proficiency in that assessment before they let you move on. And we will have people overseeing content areas, K to 12, or I should say 1 to 12, and then an overseer of the product. The challenge as we get into all this, and I'll say it up front, the unknowns we don't know right now. I don't know how many teachers are coming back to school. We will find out next week. I don't know how many students are coming back to school. We will find out next week. Parents have the ability to bounce in and out. We just talked about a time frame. That has a lot to do with how we decide classes. Folks have talked a little bit about class size or teachers or whatever. I don't know where I'm putting people yet, because if we have a drastic drop-off at Indian Head and 35 or 40% of the population don't show up at Indian Head and 100% show up at Duval, I might need more help over there. I'm not sure yet. And again, if we have 20% of our teachers that don't come back, and we work with the association to tell teachers how they can use FMLA or the alphabet soup pieces out there of how people can use COVID-related illness, they have some choices. What we've, and I'll go a little bit more outside of this hybrid, is that we've told the association, and the association has worked with us, if teachers need to take time, they need to meet with us in the association and work something out with them. It just can't be a letter, it can't be a phone call, it's an official process, so we're going to send out information to teachers and parents after this meeting tonight. We'll put something out on Monday, we're expecting information back on next week, and when I end up, it's going to be imperative for parents to tell us the truth and answer our questions, because we will be making classroom decisions based on the information we have.
I think before we get into a lot more questions, because there's a lot of questions out there, I think we need to flesh out the details a little bit of the hybrid plan. I think what you're hearing tonight is that it is the recommendation of the COVID team, it is the recommendation of the Whitman Hanson Regional School District to you as the governing body at school committee that we are promoting the hybrid plan. So a hybrid plan, like Jeff had said earlier, we know the bones of it. The structure of it is going to be, you're going to be placed in a cohort either A, which you'd be come to school physically Monday, Tuesday, everyone would have a virtual Wednesday, and then on Thursday, Friday, that cohort A would have interaction virtually with with staff and their classmates. And they'd be using Infinite Campus for attendance, and they'd be using for Google Classroom for their platform. They'd also be using Google Meet in order to meet face-to-face virtually. So when we think of hybrid, we think of virtual. When we think of remote, that's something else. So that is what that looks like. Cohort B, conversely, would be at home on Monday, Tuesday, would still have virtual Wednesday, and then on Thursday, Friday, they'd be in with their teachers. Now, students will be placed in a regular students will be placed in a regular class, if we think about the elementary world right now, and once they're placed in that class, then they would proceed. So what would happen is, teacher has group A, cohort A on Wednesday morning, she has the ability then on virtual Wednesday for everybody, she has the ability to bring both cohorts together, do a responsive classroom exercise, work on those SEL, work on resiliency, because that's what a lot of this is, and then she has the ability in that morning time frame to then break off and work with smaller groups academically. Now, depending on what takes place with the number of teachers that comes back, I think we have an exciting opportunity to really maximize learning for kids. If we have some teachers at the elementary level that are not able to return in person, they would become the teachers of social studies and science on the remote days when the students in that cohort are not in school. What does that mean? That means that cohort A has Mr. Howard Monday, Tuesday live. Cohort A and B are together virtually on Wednesday, and then cohort A, who are not in school on Thursday and Friday, would have another elementary teacher and then be able to focus on science and social studies virtually. So what that does is it frees up live and in-person education for literacy and numeracy, or math and English, as we all know it, live and in person. Those happen to be also our two tested subjects mostly at the elementary level. Now, when you're talking about science and social studies, when the students get that online, the teacher has the ability to do experiments virtually. The students have the ability to dive deeper in that because it'll be an online format, and there's connection back to a person and a teacher from Whitman Hanson during the course of the day when they're not in school physically. The really nice part of that is that you can take one teacher to be social studies, because that is grade level specific, but that teacher has the ability then to do different grade levels for social studies throughout the course of their day. Different cohorts from different grades, those kids are at home. That teacher then also has the ability, though, to now think about this, multi-grade level science, because the frameworks for science are multi-grade level. You can have K to 2, you can have 3 to 5. In a really big world, I'm not trying to confuse everybody, all I'm trying to say is that you have the ability to look at education differently. I think we have the ability to look at education possibly better, and I think we have the ability to maximize the 2.5 days that you're going to see students in a virtual Wednesday and then 2 days live to really focus on literacy and numeracy. And if that's so, and we can do that well, then this could be a success in a hybrid situation. When you talk about the middle school in a hybrid situation, the format's basically the same, except at the middle school level, we're going to take the existing teachers who already have kids in front of them, and we have this period called academic extension. When I first got to Whitman Hanson in 2003, that was called Spanish and French. Right now, that's sort of self-directed study with your teacher of record in front of you. If we take and cover that study with a paraprofessional who already knows what's going on in the room, and we remove 2 of those teachers, a science and a social studies, during the course of the regular day, let's say on a Monday, that person then, during the course of their 7 hours, has the ability to check in with their cohort who's not in class. So we're not sharing teachers at the middle school level or the secondary level. We're using the same teachers that you'd see all week, and then you can check in with them. On the off days, you'd still have virtual Wednesday check-in, but on the off 2 days, you now have assignments that you can see your teacher and check in with, and you'd have the Google Classroom platform, which is where you'd be able to pass in your assignments. And the nice thing about that is that Google Classroom, I just got an email today, by August 11th, should fully integrate with Infinite Campus. So a student has the ability now to have attendance, because I pass in my Google Classroom assignments, or I'm virtually looking at you in my check-in, and those assignments now flow from Google Classroom into Infinite Campus. Now, this sounds beautiful as I say it. I mean, we'd have to work that out, don't get me wrong. But that's the ability that you have. Same teacher of record all week. At the high school, we have 2 options that we're looking at for the other cohorts. God, this mask is hot. We have 2 other options that we're looking at for the cohorts. One is live stream laptop. Because, what do I mean by that? That means that if Chris Scriven is teaching chemistry at the high school, I heard that was his favorite subject back in '88. If he's teaching chemistry at the high school, he would have the ability, according to the normal schedule of his class and the student's class, to log in and teach that class, and if you're at home in that cohort, you know the schedule of the day, you could log right in and take that class. He would also have the ability to then assign subject work or assign work for those classes. If that streaming piece doesn't work or whatever, you can give extension work, again, through Google Classroom and then into Infinite Campus. So you can still have students do live work, you can still have meaningful work, it still counts as structured learning time, and you can do it that way. The goal is for laptops, and the goal is to stream. If not, we would do it a little bit like you see in the middle school level, or the third option that the high school is still exploring is to reconfigure the schedule where you get a longer block in one period. And during that longer block, the teacher moves into a seminar or an academic extension period with the kids in front of them while they also log on and check in Zoom, Google Meet with their class at home. Thereby, for 30 minutes, it's almost like we're all in the same meeting together answering questions about the work we've covered. So I think it's important that people know that I've talked a lot, I'm sorry, that when your students are not in school on their cohort, there will be face-to-face, there will be work that's done, and that's what's pivotal about that Wednesday check-in, because you can reteach what you've already, for the students you've seen, you can pre-teach, or you have the ability to work on things like social emotional learning. You have the ability to work on things like citizenship. You have the ability to work on different aspects that you're going to see or that kids need that they would miss in the regular traditional 5 days. That's what I got. I can talk a dog off a meat truck. I can stay all night. Yeah.
So those are the three pieces here. You also have diagrams or pictures, and I could put them up online. But Ernie took pictures of diagrams at every school to show you what the classroom setup looks like 6 feet apart. So you will see desks aren't together. We've asked teachers to take we didn't, the Commissioner of Education asked us to have teachers remove all items out of their classrooms to maximize space. Now, if we end up moving into a hybrid or a full remote or whatever, teachers might be able to put some certain things in their classroom, but not yet. We're going to wait for direction from the state. But I wanted you folks to see visually what 6 feet looks like and what a classroom is going to look like for our students. I think you heard it, George, we are endorsing the hybrid to you. That doesn't mean that that's your decision. This is after hours of looking at what's best for our kids and the safety of our teachers and our students. This is what we're proposing that we feel comfortable we can implement to start school September 15th. That doesn't mean that if it's not working, we try something new and pivot. That doesn't mean that if the committee decides September 30th that we move into full remote because parents want that, or the committee wants that, or the governor wants that, we'll implement that. I think we have a solid remote plan. In March, we didn't have a solid remote plan. We didn't know, we just did, because that's what we had to do. I think through feedback from teachers, from students, from parents on what it looked like, they were all over the place. I don't think it was a huge success. I think it was we punted and we did the best we could. We got about a 40-yarder out of it. It wasn't awesome. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't awesome. I think we worked hard on it. And that's why if we end up in a hybrid, the piece on Wednesdays where teachers can work on their craft for remote if we have to, it's really important for students to understand the expectations are going to be very different than they were in May or in June. So given that opportunity to prep what that expectation will be like, because if we see a surge, and talking to some teachers, they said, I really want to see my kids, one, to establish a relationship, and we talk about relationship all the time, establish that relationship to at least see them, even with a mask on, see them, and then tell them, if we end up in a remote setting, this is what class is going to be like. So they want that opportunity to establish that, and not just see them behind the screen for the first time. That's what I'm hearing from staff. That's what I'm hearing from my peer group, who are teachers as well. They're nervous. They're anxious. I think parents and teachers, everyone is up here with anxiety, including everyone in this room and everyone sitting behind me. We want to look forward and see where we go. So those are the three plans, and I'm going to take your questions after we go through. I just want you to keep jotting them down. because I want Lauren to talk a little bit about special education, because that's key for our special populations, and then Ernie's going to talk a little bit about facilities. So Lauren, why don't you come on up? And this is the students prioritized piece in your packet. It's up there as well.
Hi, good evening. So DESE is strongly encouraging districts to consider, regardless of what plan we go back on for all students, whether we end up in a hybrid situation or a remote situation, we're being asked to prioritize our students with the most complex needs and try to offer up to full-time services for those students. What we discovered in the spring when we went part-time is that while everyone was affected by being on remote, there is definitely a certain population of our students that was disproportionately affected. There are students in this district that just cannot learn on a computer screen. They read that because of the nature of their disability or because of where they're at in learning the English language, being in front of a screen just isn't the same education for them. So we are prioritizing these students, and they fall into several groups. The first is preschool and kindergarten. We do have an integrated preschool here for students with special needs, and it's very clear that these students need to learn and acquire these skills in a natural setting with peers around them. They're learning language. They're learning social skills. They can't do that in front of a screen. So we are going to prioritize those students for full-time services. The second group is our students with disabilities who spend the majority of their day in a sub-separate program. And one of the ways we'll be able to prioritize them is they're already in a small cohort. Most of these sub-separate programs are groups of students, ranging maybe 3 or 4 students in a program up to 5 or 6 with a max of 10. So we're already talking about a smaller cohort in a full-size classroom, and these students are used to being in that cohort with this group of students and their teachers and support providers all day. So the goal is to have them here all week, Monday through Friday, with the Wednesday being a half day. So we would bus them or have them on vans for the half day to allow the other half of the day for their teachers to still participate in the common planning that's needed, running team meetings, doing assessments, things like that. So these students would come to school Monday through Friday with a half day on Wednesday. The other group we're prioritizing is our English language learners. I've been working closely with our lead English language teacher, who's been working closely with all of the teachers and tutors, and we're really looking at, we've prioritized them kind of in 2 groups. The first group is the most needy population because per their access scores, they're a level 1 or a level 2, which means they're really at the very beginning stages of acquiring the English language. They are going to benefit greatly from being exposed twice to the same content. It's actually a benefit to them. So by having them come in on both cohort days, they're going to be exposed twice. Then they will also come in on Wednesday where they're going to get their direct EL support and instruction and still receive their services. The last group we're going to prioritize, and we're going to do this on a case-by-case basis, but we really need to look at our students who are economically disadvantaged, who may be in a homeless situation where they're sleeping in a different place each night, or there's nobody to monitor what's happening during the school day. They just were not able to make effective progress when we were in a remote situation because of the foster care, homelessness, economically disadvantaged, things like that. So we're going to prioritize those students on a case-by-case basis based on how they did in the remote model, and also offer opportunity for them to come in on Wednesday for extra just academic support and help. So that's how we're that's the plan that we're proposing to prioritize these groups for up to full-time in-person services.
Does anyone have any questions for Lauren?
Actually,
Dawn?
part of the economically disadvantaged, and maybe Jeff and George can answer, in the spring, were there families that didn't have internet connectivity? It just wasn't available, even though we hear about free access, but would they
We will be
have an
looking at that.
opportunity to
Yes.
Yeah, so
come in person?
if I can jump in on that, part of the one of the funding sources that we received through the Federal CARES Act, but through the state of Massachusetts, was called ESSER, and ESSER is an acronym. But however, we did receive funds for that, and we have decided internally that that's going to go to things like technology, education, and connectivity. So some of the things we're working on is the ability then to not only point people in the direction of free or low access cable hookups like with Xfinity, but also the purchase and the rental or the giving away, as it were, on an agreement of mobile hotspots. So we're looking into that now. Granted, everybody in the country is looking into that, but that is one of the things we're also looking at. We're also looking at, when you talk about a technology access piece, Jeff mentioned it before, but we will have the ability, like we did in the spring, for those that need it, to take X amount, how many hundreds we need of laptops, and reconfigure them like you would normally at your home to access a Wi-Fi system outside of this school. We would then have, in a hybrid situation, let's say the 12 to 15 that you would have in your class. So a student would have the ability to have access in school and the ability, if needed, to have access at home from a Whitman Hanson device. We would strongly encourage families that have access on their own to allow us not to have to lend them one, but if we do, we would. Right now, we are currently, we have ordered $175,000 with some of this ESSER money of additional Chromebooks. They're both Lenovo and or HP. However, there is like Jeff said, there is a massive shortage of all of that. We have been told that late September, October, they would come in, and then we would get those into use also as we need. But yes, that when economically disadvantaged is discussed, those are the things that we say, what are your needs, and we try to move forward with them. Just one more thing on that, lunches would be available. We have the Meal Pay Plus app. The Meal Pay Plus app has a pretty new exciting thing, because I'm looking for excitement in this job lately. And the Meal Pay Plus app, it would now be available to families and students at the secondary level, where they can order lunch if they need it, from a grab-and-go or curbside pickup if they need it, even on the days where their cohort might not be in school or on Wednesdays. So there's going to be a lot coming out on that. We're just doing it as we see now. We just had actually the meeting today with technology and food services. So that is another piece, not only when we talk about economically disadvantaged, but just parents and families who might need that resource.
George, I'm sorry. Do you guys have any idea how many families do or do not have internet access through the district?
Yeah, so based on what we do every year and how we pull it, we have less than 3.8% as of last year families that do not have internet. Now, that is different than complete and full access. You will notice that when we did the parent survey, of those that responded to the parent survey, we asked not only do you have access in your home, but then do you have access to a device whenever needed, or multiple devices or things of that nature. We did get into some cases where we gave out 2 and in one case 3 Chromebooks to the same family in the spring, because that is what happened. I would implore those of you, though, I think it should be well known, because we are a community, that not all Chromebooks came back. So we still do have some that were never returned, and we have been in touch with those families, but that is a situation that we also have to plan for. But most have, only less than 4% don't have connectivity for the internet, but that is not the same as access, and according to the survey we have from the results, that is about a little under 8%.
Dan?
Lauren, or somebody, the economically disadvantaged students, on there it says 2 full days and 1 half day. Is that different than the rest of the school?
Yeah, because that would be in person.
Because they have to have it in person.
Yeah, so those would be more of a resource tutorial. If it's an EL student, we would put them all together, and then we would really focus on those language acquisition skills that our level 1 and level 2 EL students don't have, so that would be all together. I think of note also, when we talk about the Wednesday virtual day, those times of connection on the virtual world will be in the morning. It's going to be based on the schedule that we all know in this community of half days, because that's going to allow for families to schedule that day when their students should be on, and then it also allows in the afternoon for the grade level planning, for the meetings, and for those interactions that the teachers need. So students who come physically on Wednesday, if you're in a special population group, would have a half-day physically in the building, and then the virtual aspect of that would also be on our half-day schedule, just so we can provide continuity and a structured schedule to the families.
Chris?
For either of you, because this kind of dovetails, I'm not sure I would classify them necessarily as economically disadvantaged, but if we have parents that have to work, right, because in March, everything shut down, no one's working. So if we have parents that have to work, and they're not, the parents and guardians are simply not going to be, they don't have a support system that would allow someone to be home with their child, would they fall in, what accommodation would we be able to make in that type of situation?
Right now, my guideline would be free and reduced. I'm sorry. My guideline, I guess, and that would be a great question to pose to our commissioner.
Right, because I'm not sure they're gonna fall into free and reduced. It might simply do they need to work, they have a job.
So I don't have an answer for you on that right now. I can't give a clear definition, except for free and reduced at this point, about that economically disadvantaged piece. I think when Desi rolled this out and said, you need to prioritize those students, and we've tried to do that, so I don't know, nobody set a different parameter yet. So that's a great question for us to follow, or you send to Russell to do that.
I will say, though, that there are agencies like the YMCA who are looking to establish places not within the school building where they could have some sort of daycare. I don't want to speak for them. We have a meeting coming up with them where they could establish some sort of daycare-type situation to help alleviate that. Right now, the best we have is that when we pull household, so Jeff talked about we can have the ability to have kids in the same household go together. That's an infinite campus blended learning thing, which is our student management system. When that happens, we at least can get, let's say, all the Scrivens in cohort A, so that if, right, so that if older sibling wouldn't have even the same time, because we've staggered some of those times, could get up, get a breakfast for them, and then they'd go. But that's a great question. What do we do for the off days for those families that simply have to work, that might not fall under DESI's guidelines of economically disadvantaged? It's out there. We don't have direction from the state on that yet.
And maybe it's just the public that's watching, if they're aware.
Fred, then Don, then Mr. Boyce.
If they're aware they're gonna have those situations. I know you guys are probably getting enough feedback, but this is one case where I'm sure you'd welcome.
I think that's a great
Sure.
question.
Reach out now and see what can be.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Fred, then Don, then Mr. Boyce. I know this is a little difficult. I'm watching you.
I know I asked you about the possibility of setting up a Y program in the gymnasium. You know, if we weren't using a gymnasium, if that could be accomplished. Within this plan, are students traveling to the cafeterias?
In which plan? In the hybrid?
In the hybrid.
In the hybrid.
In the hybrid plan, according to the latest DESI regulations, you do have the ability to access the cafeteria. However, there are restrictions for it. Much like a lot of you are, you have to be facing one way. You cannot have students sit across from each other at the same table, and you have to make sure they're equidistant more than 6 feet before a mask comes off and they eat. There will be situations also, though, where students are going to eat in their classroom, and a lot of that is dependent, it's also allowed, and a lot of that is dependent upon the individual schedules of the school. But there's both.
I'm just wondering if that might be a location, you know, other than my idea of, you know, sectioning off the gym. And
I think it's a good idea. My only concern is that we're trying to work hard in the building to separate, and then on those off days, we'd bring together, so I don't know if that would cross-pollinate, cross-contaminate the...
You may not be able to
Right.
even
But that's why what's
accommodate
come-
everyone, but at least you could accommodate.
What's come from the boys' club and the girls' club and the other things have been off-sites to work in conjunction with schools, but a separate site.
Dr. Jones has got a discussion.
Just real quick to help out with the gymnasium question, because of the cafeteria and the restrictions, we don't have the room. We're going to have to use the gymnasium for the second part of the cafeteria and split the students just where they go. So we won't have the room to do a program.
But we might have gymnasiums in other buildings.
Yep. I mean, I think that's a
John.
good question. I think the working with the Y, they sent me something the other day saying this is what they're looking at. They're looking at alternative sites, college campus, whatever, to do not daycare, so to speak, but virtual learning. For those districts that go fully remote, parents have to work, they can maybe go there, and they gave me a list of what it looks like for a student on a hybrid, what it looks like in their tiers. So we'll be working, we're going to be meeting with them next week. The other piece around the Y is we have to figure out if we can actually have the Y here for our morning and afternoon. It's going to be a whole set of cleaning and making sure we do that. So that's next step after we establish what we're doing. Then that's our next step. And luckily, we do have a little bit of time. We're not opening on the 27th anymore.
While we're talking about education, you also have the ability not only to use the cafeteria, but in a properly structured way, students can actually go to physical education. It might be different than what we've done in the past, but that class has the ability to utilize outdoor space or socially distant appropriate phys ed space with that teacher. So that can happen. Other things like art or those nature would have to move into a classroom. But when we talk about the physical education aspect of it, you can take advantage of the outside, you can take advantage of gymnasiums, but again, students have to travel socially distant with masks on and all of those parameters before they engage in that. There will also be no changing of, sometimes at the higher grade you change for gym or you change for phys ed or wellness. That would no longer be available, so that you'd report to the bleachers, whatever, socially distant, and you could have your class. The concept of movement in a school is going to be a little bit greater as the child gets older, because that is the makeup of a high school schedule. As you're at younger grades, it's a lot of teachers might have to move from class to class, the cohort stays. As you get into, except for something like phys ed or the movement to a cafeteria, which is unavoidable, there would be movement at the high school, and Dr. Jones is trying to work with staggered passing times and things of that nature, because sometimes you have a junior who's in a class with a sophomore, who's in a class with a senior, and you still want to be able to offer them the quality education that they deserve.
Dawn?
Thank you. Lauren, this question is for you. I want to reference this handout that's titled Students Prioritized for In-Person Learning in a Hybrid or Remote Model. So it mentions 4 full days in person and the half-day Wednesday, and these would include students with disabilities in substantially separate programs, as well as students with disabilities in the partially sub-separate programs. So if you can just sort of clarify, are we in touch with these families that they know that they will have these services available to them, these full days?
Once we get through this.
Once we vote
Once
on
we decide
it.
there, yes.
But that's the
Absolutely.
intention.
Correct.
That whether the committee votes hybrid or remote, your plan for students that fit into this.
And just to clarify, so yes, we do have some students who spend 75% or more of their day in a substantially separate classroom, so that one is really easier for us to manage because that's their day anyway. They're with the same teacher and they're in the same classroom. But we also have a group of students that have learning disabilities that require maybe half of their day in a sub-separate classroom and half the day with opportunity for inclusion. So we're still going to do that, even though they're going to be here for all 4 days. They're still going to be assigned to one of the 2 cohorts so that we can still provide them opportunity for inclusion per their IEP, but with 1 cohort. And then on the other day, when the other cohort's in, they'll be in the substantially separate setting. So one of the things we have to do in all of this is still consider the least restrictive environment. DESE requires us to look at a student's learning and to educate them with non-disabled peers as much as possible. So we are still looking to do that. And the other thing I want to mention is, even though we've been talking about our most severely impacted students, I want to assure all parents who have students that have an IEP, maybe they only have inclusion services, or maybe they have consult services, or maybe they only come out for 30 minutes a day. We're not forgetting about them, we're just prioritizing the full-time in-person for our substantially separate programs, but all IEP services will be provided. The when, the how, the where might look a little different, because if we're on a hybrid, it's going to look different, but every student's IEP and all services in a student's IEP will be provided. Some might be remote, some might be in person, some might be on the days that they're here, some might be on the days that they're home. But I just want all parents to know that they will have a contact with their liaison before school starts, and they will have a services plan that shows exactly how the IEP services will be delivered in whatever model we're going to be going with. And that's why the 10 days that we have as staff here in the building before the kids come are going to be really important for the special education department because we have a lot to accomplish in those 10 days. We need to make contact with every family and really walk them through the process of what services are going to look like. And every family will then get a copy of a services plan that will kind of, because the IEP is going to stay put. We're all waiting for that day where we're back and the IEP will be implemented as written. And in the meantime, there'll be a services plan that while we're in this strange time, it will show how services will be delivered, whether hybrid or whether remote.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyce?
Lauren, actually, and it's the same two areas that, programs that Dawn was mentioning. Under Hanson Middle, for the PACE program and the language-based learning, should they say 5 through 8 for the grades?
That's an excellent question. So we developed that program just last year. We're in its
Yeah.
second year. And based on the funding that we had available and a couple of students that really were in need of the program, we developed it for grade 6 to 8 because grade 5 is on a very different schedule than 6 to 8 is. To be honest with you, it is an issue because I would really love to see programming from elementary to high school, and that is a challenge because we have some 5th graders that are at Hanson Middle School, and we have some 5th graders that are still at the elementary level. So that is a challenge when it comes time to looking to expand on that program, which I would love to do. But right now, it is a 6 to 8 program.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. And if you don't mind if I just mention one more thing. Pilgrim Area Academy is meeting right now, going through this same process. So I just want to, I'm sure you probably already know, but for those that might not. So thank you.
Just want to piggyback on Lauren a little bit to help answer your question, Ms. Byers. With our language-based students, they have English and math in a pull-out section, and they're in inclusion in science and social studies. So we've configured our schedule so that they can be in every day. So by grade level, there's about 10 in each grade level, 6, 7, and 8. There's about 10 kids. So they would be kind of like their own cohort, but like the 8th grade might be in your homeroom. They're going to stay in that, our kids are going to stay in their homeroom all day long. We would pull them out on Monday and Tuesday, and they would go to English and math. The kids who have the Thursday, Friday cohort would come in and they would be in homeroom with those other teachers, with the language-based teachers. Or we may put them all in the same homeroom, we just haven't figured that out yet. But what would then happen is when they go, if on Monday and Tuesday, I'm in the Monday-Tuesday cohort, I would go back to the inclusion class and have my full day in the inclusion setting. The students in the Thursday, Friday setting would go to English, math, then they would go to one of our other special ed teachers, work on their inclusion work with their cohort, but in school and be getting support from a special education teacher. And then we would flip that on the other 2 days. And then they would go to their language-based teacher by grade level, or assign one per grade level for social studies. So that same process would fold. And the schedule allows us to do that and have those students all in. And then in our separate classroom in the PACE program, they're all included in one class anyway. So the thing that we'll be able to do in that class is on the Wednesday, we'll be able to give them their related arts, because the related arts teachers would be free to go into those classes and provide phys ed, music, art, etc.
Excellent.
So.
Thanks, Bill. Bill, I'm still coming to see you, but I put you down for 2021.
Whenever you want to come over.
Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions for Lauren?
Okay. Lauren, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lot of planning.
That was excellent.
I'm going to ask Ernie Sandlin to talk, because I know people have facilities questions. His team has done a great job of doing what we've asked him to do, of outlining classrooms, doing the pressure test. He can explain to you what it's going to look like for September. As far as cleaning, we're adding additional cleaning staff. We're adding hand sanitizing stations across the district. I'll let Ernie talk about that a little bit. You have it in your packet, you have what the cleaning supply, what that looks like, so if you turn to the facilities piece, it'd be great.
Good evening, everybody. What I look at with DESE, July 22nd, they actually gave us a roadmap to an adventure we've been on since the kids have been out of school. July 22nd, what they've identified as critical health and safety in facilities, we were pretty much working on those early on. I'll give you a good example. For the town of Hanson, we have identified early on that windows need to be repaired at the Indian Head and Hanson Middle School. We put that in the capital budget last year, October of last year. So that's been a big issue with DESE and the state, identifying air movement in the building. But if you go down the list, I don't know if you have a copy of it, preparing for these spaces, learning spaces, staff office spaces, mask break, even to the point where we have playground areas in elementary school that we're going to designate as a mask break area. So again, what we're looking at is things that we've been preparing for and adjusting to and what DESE has come up with. Medical waiting rooms, and then we look at it as an isolation space. We have a couple of buildings where we've had to create isolation spaces in the nurse's office, and just in case one of the students comes down and has symptoms of COVID-19. And that entails building an area, creating a space in that area, and making sure that's a safe space for them to be in. And also for the staff to be able to see them in that area, and also having a bathroom available for them. So there's a lot that goes on in there. And then as you go down the list of entry and spaces, as far as the schools, coming into the schools, we used to allow people to enter this high school and go to the counter. That ended. Same thing with the elementary and middle schools. So all those things we've adjusted to. And when you look down at the next line, making systems and other space used in modification, ventilation, and HVAC. That's the McGiller that we're dealing with right now. Looking at our system, to look at what we have for univents. We have 220 univents in the district, just over 300 classrooms in this district, but univents are an item that, it's a low bid item, and it brings in heat and ventilation into the classroom, and we have to be able to treat those univents in the future. But right now, the important thing is for us to get air and ventilation into those classrooms that we have. Again, I described it, over 300 classrooms in the district, that we have to make sure that we have airflow into those classrooms. Going down the list, operation protocol, as far as school cleaning and disinfecting, we have a contractor that we've been in communication with, and we've identified, I guess, for me, is trust but verify, and the cleaning protocols that we have in place with the contractor. So here's what my vision is, and here's what we're going to be doing. We have training for all our custodial staff, all our staff, on the 19th of August. And what will happen there is we'll bring in professionals to train the staff on all the touch points and what has to be cleaned during the day when the kids and students are here, and office staff are here. And then what we're going to do after the training, we're going to verify that what they're doing works correctly. We're bringing in a hygienist, and that hygienist will take samples, and there's an automatic reader to make sure that if there's a cleaning process done, that it's foolproof. It's not just, oh yeah, they cleaned the doorknob, oh yeah, they cleaned that. We want to make sure that when that cleaning is done, that it's done the right way. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in the district. Not saying it is out of the unusual that we're, taking our HVA system apart and figuring out the best way to run the system. We wouldn't normally do that during the summer months. Our summer months would be spent on trying to get the buildings back together, changing filters, and making sure the classrooms go back together. Right now, what we're looking at is cleaning the classrooms, getting the ventilation working, getting the cleaning protocols done, and then taking all the furniture that, and Jeff described, you got the pictures of the classrooms that we have there. On the average here, we probably, at the high school, we probably, under normal circumstances, we probably have 25 to 26 desks and chairs in those classrooms. We're reducing that to 15. So those extra desks and chairs have to go somewhere. And so we have contracted a contractor to rent storage trailers, and that's district-wide. We have bookcases and file cabinets and all this furniture in one building that has to be stored. And then we multiply that times 5, and you're going to see a lot of, especially with the elementary schools, they've been pack rats. The teachers have been pack rats, and there's bookcases and file cabinets. Some of the file cabinets don't work properly, but all those things have to be taken out of the classroom and that open space, because the way it's designed, the way DESI came up with the configuration is if we come up with 6-foot space in between desks, we've got to get the teacher a 6-foot space. Everything else has to be open. And we had an analysis done district-wide this summer. I think Jeff and George used that digital readout to the state. The way we did it is we did it with 3-foot spacing. And we've digitalized each classroom and how we could lay it out. And we kind of know what has to be stored and what can be used in the classroom. So it's been a huge task to get done, and we're still working on it. But our goal is, obviously, my goal is always to see the kids back in the classroom, because when they're back in the classroom, I've done something successful, and then you hand it over to the principals and the teachers to follow that on. Right now, we're in the process of making sure that they're able to get back into the classroom, and we're covering all those bases. And that's why I say when DESI finally gave us that blueprint to work with, identifying the important things to work on, we actually have been working on those earlier, and I think we're making good progress. So, if you have any questions?
Fred?
A few questions. First off, right off the top of my head, storage.
Yeah.
Have we looked into perhaps the McQuon, over in Whitman, the Armory, the Park Ave School, which has been shuttered for quite a while, but I don't know if that would be a viable storage space, or the old police station, to be able to utilize storage instead of having to rent trailers?
Well, we haven't looked at the Armory, because we looked at the Armory before, and that's pretty much booked with a lot of town stuff.
Okay, I didn't know if there's any room left in there.
No, actually, we tried to put our mowers in there, and the chief was really, really good for about 3 or 4 years, and then it got to the point where during the winter, I would like to store the mowers in there.
Yeah.
He had no more space because of a bunch of town stuff. McQuon School, we're at the point now where we have very little in there. It's a town property, and I don't know what it would do, but that's.
Oh, I mean, we would have to ask the town of Hanson.
Yeah.
Maybe even if you're.
But they're good questions, and we'll ask.
The old police station at Town Hall. I don't know what's in there, but there might be room in there for
Storage.
quite a bit, throw the desks
Auditorium at the town hall.
in the old jail cells or whatever. Those are
But
still there.
downstairs at Town Hall,
Yeah.
I think they're using that for something else, but.
They could.
Is it
Yeah,
full?
I think they are.
I don't know. I've been down there since you could slide in the back way through Town Hall.
As soon as they moved in, they started filling that spot real quick.
The air quality tests.
Yeah.
Are we having a separate company come in and identify that we have enough fresh air moving? I know we've had CO2 problems in the past.
Yeah, and I think whenever they've identified CO2 as an issue, we address it.
But have we tested now to make sure that we have?
We know what the
sufficient-
baseline is, Fred. We know what the baseline is without the students in there. We know what the baseline is when the students are in there. We know what the baseline is when the students come in from recess. We have all that information. Right now, what we're trying to understand is 100% ventilation. Let me give you a good example. These windows behind you right here have never been opened because it's an air-conditioned building. We're going to see these windows opened.
Yep.
And we're going to see screens on the outside on those, because fresh air, when this library is being used, fresh air is going to have to come in here. When we look at the Hanson Middle School, we're under the same ramifications there. We have to open all those windows. And here's the thing that George and Jeff and I have been talking about. Hanson Middle, and every building's different. Hanson Middle, we have the Univent, and then the designer, the engineer, 20 years ago came up with the idea that they would put the exhaust fan for the classrooms out in the corridor. So now the Univent comes on, and that air travels across the classroom. If the door is shut, probably sneaks under the door, goes beside the door. It's designed to go out into the corridor. So that's how they came up with the airflow. Conley and Duval, by the door, there's a vent in the door. Same idea. The Univent brings the air in, heated air or just regular circulation air, and it's designed to pull it up and bring it out the roof. So what we're looking at is doing smoke tests to figure out how fast is that air, because it's obviously invisible. You can't see when it's moving. How fast is that air moving out of the classroom? Where is that air coming from the Univent? Does it cross the desk? Where does it go when it comes across? And the only way we know that is by doing tests like that to figure that out. So the air quality is a huge issue. We've known that from day one, and we're working in the right direction to get what the issues are in our district, because you got to remember, even in this beautiful building we have here, it was a low bid contractor that bid it. So what they try to do is put the cheapest thing in here. It's up to the architect and the owner to make sure that the best quality goes in there. But it's basic stuff that goes into the public buildings. Now we have a building that is energy conservation, and we're going to reverse that. We have to reverse that now to make sure it is a place that oxygen runs in and out of this building, where it wasn't never designed to do that.
Is it safe to open if we don't know that we're bringing in enough fresh air?
Absolutely. We're going to be in a position that we know, just like the smoke test I identified, that we know that the basics that the state and DESI is talking, according to ASHRAE standards, is open the windows and use ventilation as a tool, and that's what we're going to do. And what we're trying to do, we're thinking beyond that. We're coming up with other ways to handle the air while it's in the buildings.
And going to our cleaning protocols, are we fogging at all?
We do.
Okay, so.
Electrostatic. Fogging is, and I know George mentioned this, fogging, when people come into your building, if that thing's not sealed, it would, like wallpaper falling off the wall when they fog. With electrostatic, it attacks under the table, under the chair, touch points that you don't really know that people have been
Well,
to.
the chemical is charged.
Yes.
There's a positive atom,
Yeah,
and
the
this is a
equipment's
negative
charged.
atom, and it's
Right,
drawn
right,
toward
exactly.
it.
You know just as much, if not more, than I do about this.
Yeah.
But for us, the electrostatic type treatment is what we want to do. And we have the equipment, and we've ordered more equipment, and our protocol, and you must have a copy of it.
Yep.
Our protocol, again, is, to make sure it gets done the way it's supposed to get done.
I didn't see the fire, I see the wiping of handles and the wiping of everything, and I'm not familiar with the BioWest product. I don't know what the wet time needs to be. I know in most of the products that are rated for COVID, it's either a 5-minute wet time or a 10-minute wet time.
This is 10 minutes.
It's 10 minute?
Yeah,
Okay, because I know like the SC360 stuff is 5 minute.
yes.
Ammonium, and I'm sure it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Quatrate. So when they wipe it down, are they making sure that it stays wet for 10 minutes, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, and that goes back to what I had mentioned to you earlier about verifying that it's done the way it's supposed to be done. And I think training is so important right now to when they have a class or a seminar on how things are supposed to be done, the practical thing is that they need to go back, and they'll see that in real time. They'll see that what they did worked or what they did didn't work, and then we'll correct them or the custodial staff from doing it and making sure that they do it right.
Okay.
Anyone else have any
Oh, sorry.
Hillary?
At the secondary, can you hear me? Is it okay? I don't have a microphone. Can you? The secondary level, kids moving classes, are you going to be,
Steve?
is there going to be a requirement to clean desks in between? And I know at the secondary level, we're trying to limit the movement of children, but it's inevitable. So is there anything, and I don't know if this is a question for you or Jeff?
I think it's for them.
To clean in between classes?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is that at the secondary level or at those places when you have to move classes, we're trying to elongate the passing period so that we're working with the teachers' union to make sure that those desks and high-touch areas are wiped down then so that the next class comes in and it's clean and secure. Also, going off with that, there's also a protocol for, we're working with First Student, our bus vendor, to do the same thing in between bus runs so that high-touch areas of knobs, seats, back and side of seat will also be done during the bus runs, and then later a formal cleaning will take place, or a more intensive cleaning once it's done.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes, so, and I love these pictures, thank you very much. Knowing our younger populations and our students, having been in the schools, you'll see desks, just because they stand up, they lean against them, they're third, fourth, fifth grade, they're gonna go all over the place. I mean, when they were in groups, we'd find one group almost like, it's almost like the continent's moving. So is there a plan or something we can do, Ernie, that, and I know it's probably gonna be a teacher by teacher with the room and everything, and, I mean, they got enough going on right now, wiping down the desks and then trying to reorganize where the desks are supposed to be. Is there gonna be some sort of, other than the pictures and so forth, way to determine where that desk is and how it stays there, in a sense, I guess is what I'm asking.
Okay, Steve, I think I could answer that for you.
Thanks.
Part of the responsibility of SJ Services, not only cleaning, vacuuming, and making sure things are wiped down, we're putting that responsibility on them. We have a digital
Yeah,
readout where
okay.
the desks and chairs are supposed to be.
Yeah, you were mentioning that, okay.
So, and you don't notice this, but tomorrow morning, they'll be coming in here, they'll be wiping stuff down, and they'll be putting these tables back to where they were before. So that's going to be there, and again, that's training.
Yeah.
And there's less desks in the classrooms that they're going to be responsible for. So to answer your question, yes, I think we're going to have a pretty good handle on that.
Okay, good.
I think it's, making sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do,
Yeah,
and that's our job.
right.
Right.
Gotcha. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ernie.
Ms. Byers?
Thank you for the thorough handout. Can you give me an idea of how many SJ Services cleaning people we currently have? Because the handout indicates that we will need to hire 5 additional, and I want to talk about costs associated with not only the time and the labor intensive of cleaning, but the additional staff.
Yeah, good question. We have currently contracted with 36 SJ employees. Now, that's in every school, and I'll kind of dig into that a little bit better. In every school, they have a full-time day porter. At the high school, they have a full-time day porter and another assistant here at the high school. Then in each building, the high school has 5. 2 of them are full-time, and 3 of them are part-time. Same thing at the middle school. We have 1 full-time and 2 part-time. So what happens, Dawn, is that number starts to add up. And it's some of them, when I say 35 or 34 employees, some of them are full-time, some of them part-time.
Sure.
The 5 additional, or the additional employees we're asking for, as you pointed out, we'll have additional people on staff here. That's a recommendation from the hygienist, and also we go back to the contractor. They're responsible for making this work. If we force on to them, this is what
Right.
you're going to get, and this is all you're getting, then the burden's on us. We ask them, what are you doing in other school districts? What are you preparing for? In a district of this size, this is what they're recommending. Now, again, that might change, because this is going to be in real time when September rolls around, and we're going to figure it out a lot better.
And then when you test it, if you find it requires more cleaning,
Correct.
labor, and more
So
time.
to answer your question, finances, I whipped out the gold card, COVID gold card, and made George mad again, but it'll either be Senator Brady's money, the $200,000 that covers PPE, or cleaning, or the per pupil Plymouth County money that we have out there through both communities.
Right.
So if the cleaning costs escalate because of COVID, we can bill the COVID-related accounts. And if we need more, it's there. And it seems like there is a push from the state to make sure we do some sort of in-person, and if we say this is the way we need to do it to keep kids safe by adding additional cleaning staff, there might even be more federal money coming through. So the cost piece, yeah, I looked at it, but if we have to escalate, we'll benchmark it as we go. Like George said, we're looking at additional time. We're trying to keep cohorts even at the middle level together. So you might be a 6th grader or a 7th grader might be at middle school, and the teacher moves, but the kids stay. So you're not wiping down in between.
Right.
It'll be a little less frequent travel.
Okay.
Fred, you have another question?
Yeah, just real quick, and I was gonna say I thought it'd be COVID money, but also, I think fogging is your best bang for the buck, when you're moving. I mean, you could fog this library in probably 4 or 5 minutes, and it does an effective job.
Yeah.
I'd look into buying more foggers and,
We actually have 2 orders out there. I think there's September 1st is delivery of 4, and the middle of August is delivery of 2 more.
Okay.
But we're actually going to electrostatic. We do have the foggers, Fred,
Yeah.
but I think what happens and I just kind of described it, the papers on the wall, they'll take that after
Yeah,
the
but it's
first.
the product that's charged,
Yeah.
not per se the fogger that charges the product.
Ernie, one more question.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones?
How is electrostatic given out? How does that work?
As far as the.
Is that something that's rubbed on? Is that something?
No, it goes through, it's almost like a fogger.
Okay, like
Fred's
a,
talking about.
okay.
We actually, again, going back to December, January last year, we had some demonstrations from Clorox, and they came in and they, actually what they did, Mike, is they put painter's tape under the chairs and in crazy places that you would never think about. And then they sprayed it, and then they used a black light.
Yeah.
And then you look underneath and you see, after you pull the painter's tape off, you see it's kind of mystified everywhere else except for where the painter's tape was pulled off. So it travels in places that normal fogging will fall.
Yeah.
The electrostatic actually attacks areas underneath the chair. So it was a proven science for us by demonstrations.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ernie. Okay, so just we'll have to bring you up here because people couldn't hear your question. So if you have a question, make sure you're speaking to your mic and then turn around. I know it's not ideal, but again, this is a change that we're adjusting to and adapting to. I'm going to ask our lead nurse, Lisa Tobin, to come up, talk a little bit about health. In your packet, I don't want to go through the 27 pages of our protocol, but we have a protocol that was recommended by DESE and DPH, what to do when a student gets sick, what to do if a student has symptoms, what to do if a teacher has symptoms, all of the above. This will be on our website for parents to follow, so I think it's going to be critical that they look at this prior to whatever we do and start school in September. The key piece is identification, and I think you're never going to hear the superintendent say, if you got the sniffles, stay home. Teacher or student, stay home, at least to see how symptomatic you are. Attendance is going to matter, but the attendance police isn't necessarily going to come out and get you this year. So we want to make sure people are healthy. These are the protocols. Lisa's been in touch with Dr. Belcher, our school physician. She's going to talk a little bit about that, and then she can answer some of your questions about health. Thanks, Lisa.
So I've been on weekly Zoom calls for the past few months with the Department of Public Health discussing what our guidelines would look like to return to school, to get kids safely back to school, and with area nurse leaders on how to implement the the guidance from DESE. So we were able to put that into play a little bit over the summer as we had a small population of extended school year students. So we basically went off without a hitch. We had no major issues. We followed all of our protocols. The staff had training. The staff received written protocols on how we would do everything. So that all went fine. We also started constructing our medical waiting rooms with Ernie. So our medical waiting rooms we're trying to make adjacent to the nurse's office. So that way, if a student who's ill with COVID, they would have access to the nurse, but no access to the care of the other kids. So it will be separate, but the nurse can still get at them. And then the students that come down for regular care or for other complex medical needs, the nurse is there for them as well. So that seems to, we've been able to construct it pretty well. I think it's gonna work out in all clinics. Every medical waiting room will have windows that have to stay open and per Dr. Belcher to get as much fresh air in as possible, and all the students that have any suspected COVID symptoms will stay masked and 6 feet apart in the medical waiting rooms. So today, we did a walkthrough with both boards of health. They came into the building, we talked about our policies, we walked through the health clinic for the high school. I showed them what will be the medical waiting room and the construction we've already done. They were pleased with all of that. I've worked collaboratively with Gil and Alexis all throughout the summer. If I had any questions, turn to them. They would in turn get me the answer before we made any decisions on anything, as well as Dr. Belcher, our school physician. He's been great in getting right back to me. We talked about what the best practices would be for implementing all the guidelines from DESE. So far so good.
Anyone have any questions?
One of the things that, while Lisa, before she gets down, she's done a remarkable job with this. Right now, she's a school nurse and gets paid a stipend as a lead nurse. She's worked above and beyond that stipend. Through COVID, using COVID resources, this is what I think is in the best interest of our district. Lisa's gonna move, she's still gonna be a school nurse, but she's gonna be our lead nurse, our point person, and she's been on the phone quite a bit. So she's not gonna be she'll be in the clinic, but not necessarily seeing kids. We're gonna add a replacement part-time nurse at the high school to take care of our preschool kids. That's kind of what Lisa did, but she was full-time. We're also gonna add, we have a 20-hour-a-week float nurse who would cover a building if a nurse was absent. We can't afford to have no coverage. If that float nurse knew in her contract, she does know in her contract, if we needed her for that day, she would work the full day, even though she was a 20-hour employee. We're gonna add another float nurse, so we have 2 float nurses just in case we need those folks. And we're going to add a CNA, a certified nurse's assistant, because we need a person in those, what's it called?
If we need supervision for the medical waiting room and the nurse is not available, we're going to try to provide a CNA to watch the room, because we have to have the medical waiting room supervised.
So that CNA will be district-wide, so they might house here, but then go to Conley if we have a situation, or Duval if we have a situation, or go. So we have as much medical coverage as advised, and I think we're even going a little bit above to make sure that our students are covered and our nurses are covered. I would rather have more than less at this point, and if we have to pull back in January because we don't see the need, we can pull back, but I'd rather go forward and make sure we have adequate coverage for our kids and for our nurses as we open the school year. So that's the plan, again, covered by COVID, I'm spending that money again, and I hear it from him in the back, but I think it's essential that we do that for our needs. I don't want to have a nurse's office uncovered. That was a question on with the commissioner. What happens when a school nurse is absent and there's not a plethora of folks to cover? We're going to make sure we have 2 float nurses that can come in and fill, and if not, we then have more coverage. There's more additional paperwork with this. Lisa used to do a little of that paperwork. There's more COVID stuff and more stuff coming from DPH. I'd like her to be that point person and focus fully on that rather than doing other duties within the district. So just to let you know, we're going to have more folks in here.
Fred.
Medically.
And getting back to, what is the protocol? God forbid the student comes down, COVID-related symptoms.
So we're
So I would assume that they would be isolated and sent home.
What the plan will be.
Now we're waiting for them to get tested, perhaps?
So so as of right now, per DESE and DPH, if a student comes down with COVID-related symptoms, they'll the teacher will call us, tell us they're on their way. So it's going to change from what we've done in the past. They'll tell us they're on their way. We're going to meet this, we'll have students outside 6 feet apart that need to see us. We can meet that student at the door and do a quick assessment. We're not bringing kids into the health clinics because they have to stay sterile. So we'll do a quick assessment, and then we'll decide if that student needs to go into the medical waiting room. Once that student goes into the medical waiting room, they will have to be picked up by a parent. After that, they will need to be seen by a physician. If the physician then deems that, yes, okay, it's not his asthma, it's actually something that we think it's COVID-related, they will test them. Now we work with we now work within that cohort of students on who was their close contact. We'll take those close contacts, and per DESE, those close contacts will need to stay home. Once the test result comes in, if it's positive, the close contacts can do one of two things. They can either go get tested. If it's positive, they stay out for the full 14 days. If it's negative, they can come back once no more symptoms for 24 hours. If they choose not to have a COVID test, they have to stay home for the 14 days in quarantine.
So this is why we put Lisa in this position. She's that point of contact. If a kid comes down, she's going to go over to that building and start that process of contact tracing. If that, as best we can. And this is why, I know we had to make a call on graduation the other day. This is going to happen again, where we're going to have to notify a classroom potentially. Mom comes home from work, she's positive, she was with her son may be positive, whatever, in a classroom, we'll notify. So in that packet of protocols, it outlines everything from a kid getting on a bus, to a teacher having symptoms during the course of the day. Those are standard protocols that we will follow, and that thus the addition of Lisa into this piece, because as soon as that happens, she's going to disperse to that building and then notify us so we can then start our contacts. And I just can't leave that to the only nurse in the building.
And then I'll work collaboratively with both boards of health on the contact tracing.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to briefly go a little bit over transportation. And I don't think you have something in your packet. I just wanted to speak to what George already did. Drivers are going to wear masks. We're going to make sure they have adequate masks just in case, a kid gets on the bus with a mask and then it falls off or whatever. The other piece here, again, spending COVID money, I really feel we need to put a monitor on every bus, especially at the elementary level. It might be something for our paraprofessionals to do before school and after school. I don't necessarily feel the need for a monitor on the high school bus. If you watch the high school buses come in, kids have their headphones in. They don't want to be seen, or they don't want to be heard. They're slumped in their seat. They're not really interacting. If you see an elementary bus, they are all over the place. There's thus the need for a monitor. We will be assigning seats, and I know that's going to be a challenge. I've seen the news reports of the bus drivers saying it's going to be difficult. This whole thing, folks, is difficult. It's going to be really challenging to put 24 students on a bus, and they're going to have to sit there. Thus the need for the monitor to say, Johnny, sit down, Mr. So-and-so, sit down, move around, and be able to do that. Also, if there is an issue, address that issue, and it's not going to be up to the bus driver. They're going to wipe down after each run. Again, if you have two people, a bus driver and a monitor getting it done, it's going to be done better and more efficiently than a bus driver trying to do it because she's late for her next run or he's late for his next run. The daily disinfecting is at the end of the day. There's a product that they're looking at for a month that they do at the end of the month, but the product that I have here is what First Student is going to use at the end of every day as a disinfectant. That's what I think as far as their process. There'll be, since we share buses with Abington or we contract their First Student Services Abington as well, they're going to use the same product for all of our First Student runs. In this section here, you can see we usually have a 77 or 71 passenger bus. We're putting a max of 25 or 23 on it. And then there's a little diagram to show you what it might look like on a bus. The little red dots are our students, the driver, and the monitor. It's going to look like a little jigsaw puzzle or a little crossword as you go along. I can only recommend if parents don't have to have their students take the bus, if they can get them to school, It would be better for us as a district. It will work better. If they need the bus, they have to take the bus. Karen Villanueva is doing a great job of trying to figure this out. It is a puzzle. There we go into, whatever model we need as we go into a transportation. This is why I'm going to ask the committee to say, hey, look, students, if they're on a remote plan and they want to re-enter, it's not a waiting period, but let us know at least two weeks ahead of time, because if you're taking the bus, we have to redirect how we do the bus run. You want to add something?
Yeah, I want also everybody to know that one of the reasons is because if you have a 72-passenger bus, I know bus 24 that runs up in the Whitman area off Harvard, that would be 4 bus runs that you would need in order to make sure that that one bus run of normally 72 takes place. This will also impact exiting and entrance to schools. So when we talk about what does it look like when the buses roll in, what does it look like when the buses leave, that's part of our, if we remember the graphic organizer about 17 and a half hours ago when we began this meeting, that's one of the things that'll be worked on at that level. But if you can imagine, there's 22 buses that roll up to the high school. They're usually side by side at dismissal, or right behind each other at entrance, and at dismissal side by side. You now might be looking at the whole loop. We bring the odds in first, we bring the evens behind them, and then you'd have the ability to release like bus 1 and 22. So those students would come at the same time. You're also looking at things now that aren't lockers. So the student use of lockers really wouldn't be taking place. They'd have to have their things with them for the most part. So that exit should go a little bit quicker for those 2 buses at a time, but when you stagger it out, those are the things that we'll have to go through. Same at the elementaries, and same at the middle schools. So entrances and exits, as far as if everybody's dropping their children off in a car, we now have to handle. So those things are going to be worked on. We're going to work with some of our paraprofessionals and some of our ancillary staff to make sure that the safe and diligent or properly spaced entrances and exits will also take place for transportation.
I have some questions. Fred, Dawn, Dan. Fred.
The monthly product that they're talking about, just make sure it's EPA rated. I think I know the product that they're speaking of, and you hear claims anywhere from 30 days up to a year, up to one company that says, oh, it'll last for life.
We'll vet the product. That's the product that they're using right now that they pitched to us. But again, I'm just giving you the outline of where we're at. We'll work on those pieces if they're not what we think is appropriate as we move into September. Thank you, Fred.
Dawn.
Under the hybrid plan with the in-person cohorts A and B coming to school, do you expect school times to stay the same as they were last year? It may depend on buses and how much time you need in between?
Yes, to the best of our knowledge, Karen Villanueva feels that under the hybrid, which is half the students in a cohort, that we're talking within 5 or 10 minutes of our current schedule. So this was done because we looked at everything we could. We looked at 4 different options for hybrid, and this is the one that would stick as close as we can to our current matrix of when the buses roll to begin the day and end the day, still helping, still doing their kindergarten positions and the runs in the middle of the day. So we're talking 5-10-minute shifts as opposed to half-hour, 40-minute shifts.
Okay, one more question,
Sure.
if I may. Maybe back to Ernie on ventilation. We're talking about windows being open. So is the expectation when students return at every school that every window will be open? And what does that transition to in the colder months, right? So.
Jackets.
If you don't have a locker, you can wear your coat.
Okay.
Well, that's the battle we're going to be fighting.
Yeah.
Windows open, air handlers pulling in all outside air, 100% outside air. And that smoke test I talked about, where does that air come from and where does it go? So we want to make sure that we're just not pulling in, because I guess you would, when you look at it, this is a pressurized building, and it's designed that way. So a lot of the schools are going to have a difficult time unless we do some tweaking, bringing air in, and then not battling the pressurized in the building to escape. So as far as the winter time, We're going to be looking at, and I identify this as an important step. Running the system 2 hours before the students get here. That's the high school. So at 5 in the morning, this building will purge. I call it purging. We'll start the system up and purge the building, get the fresh air in the building, exhaust the building, and hopefully keep it where at its comfortable margin. Going into September and October, and we all know Indian summer, humidity is going to be a killer for us because we're putting air conditioners in the elementary schools. We just put 62 splits in the Hanson Middle School last year and to treat the air. But now what we're doing is we're bringing in that humid air into the classroom. The oxygen level's high, which is important, but the humidity is going to be very high. So there's a lot of challenges we're going to be up against. We're not good. You know what it is, Dawn? There's 351 communities in Massachusetts. Pretty close to, I think there's 279 facility managers. They're all up against that same challenge, trying to make all this work. And as we go through these phases, we'll discover some things and make some corrections, but collaboratively, we'll make it work. And we'll do the right thing. And I think, this leadership team here from day one has been trying to look at any option that's out there and bring it forward. If it's a good idea, we'll use it. All right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Cullity.
Okay, for transportation / hybrid and everything else, we're adding additional buses, or we're doing one bus, making 3 runs for the same?
As of right now, we're not adding additional buses. We are only using the buses that we currently exercise in this current contract. We've been told by the bus company and through Karen Villanueva that we actually do not have, we have X number of drivers and X number of buses. So we're making this work with the structure that we have in the 3rd year of our contract now.
And are we going to set up some type of option if somebody is gone to do it remotely, and then they decide they want to bring it back in and join a cohort? If they're within the radius, are we going to charge them for busing? We don't have
That is,
for that child?
that's above my pay grade. Right, but
You can't charge them.
Well, what's going to happen is that there might be different buses than normally picking up different students, depending on the situation that you might have. Karen Villanueva is bracing herself to be, as unpopular as Jeff was last week when the bus clarification pieces go out at the end of August, because there are going to be different times, different groupings, different things of that nature because of the situation that we're in. But what we're hopeful for is that the household aspect that we can have, where we pull for households, is also geographical in nature so that we can shape our bus routes. I will say that next week on Monday, by the end of the workday on Monday, there will be surveys that go out, and it's not necessarily a survey, it's almost like a info piece that goes out to the homes. That's basically going to say name, your name, student's name, where you go to school, and are you going to return in in the situation that we have, are you going to return in a remote? If not, and are you going to be taking the bus? Well, that is not legally binding. That is the matrix by which we will move forward. Conversely, while we're talking surveys or info sheets that are going to go out, one will also go out to the staff that basically says, are you returning? And we'll make our decisions based on who we have, why, and how's relating to all their rights and privileges that they have in their contract from there.
Fred, it might not be a bad idea, and I know you guys have thought of everything just sitting here listening to it, to print something up that we can send home to parents as saying, these are best practices to teach your child to try to stay safe during COVID.
Absolutely.
These are best practices that you might think of to stay safe during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
These are best practices that the school district is doing. Help us help you to stay safe.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of parents and a lot of kids, I mean, let's face it, they're going to get in and be doing this on the windows of the bus. And, if you can try to avoid some of that, the cleaning and the spreading of any of this, just something simple. I mean, for
Absolutely.
little kids, it might be almost like a cartoon thing of stay safe by doing this. And as the kids get older, obviously, you've got to
Absolutely.
handle it in a different way.
Like, we have a lot of, and we have signage going out to schools, we have signage going up in the halls, how to properly wear a mask, what you should be doing. That's a great example. And we are also going to have bus monitors. We might be utilizing some of our paraprofessionals, but who are going to be helpful as the child gets on, where you sit, and how to make that matrix go. I do want to add one last thing that DESE is allowed, is that the restriction on buses can be raised only in the situation of siblings. So if Jeff and I were brothers, we would sit in the same, we have to sit in the same bench, but that, you can be raised for that.
Fred, you had a question?
Yeah, if we're reaching out to the parents, is it possible to put together a resource sheet? Find out, like, for instance, if Xfinity is still offering free internet access, whatever else we can think of, after your meeting with the Y, et cetera, and be able to include that so they have some ideas and resources that they can tap into?
Absolutely. Once we get a decision here, then we can start working to get information out. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. These are best practices. This is what we need you to do. This is where we go, on and on and on. I think that's a great little pivot over to technology when you just mentioned Xfinity. So George is going to talk. Do you have any more questions on transportation? You talk about tech, about just how many...
Yeah, so basically technology, just to review, is that the fact that we are a situation where we will have class sets, and we're aiming for class sets in the classroom for 10 to 14, so that students can use it here. We will also have the ability to, like we did in the spring, offer a situation where somebody might need either access when that happens with Verizon hotspots, and or a device from the school. There is a window that there is a changeover that we have to do when, in order to accept any wireless access point that you have at your home, but that'll be, again, through technology in the rental, or how it would be, or the borrowing of that. One thing we have to make sure of is that while we still do not have enough Chromebooks to be a one-to-one specifically, we also have to understand that if the state still does MCAS, as we normally do in the spring, then there has to be a changeover back to receive those, because we then have to make them MCAS compliant, which is even more strict than we normally have here. But there will be availability. Again, we're asking that if there's a need, there's a need. But if there's a want and you don't need the need, maybe we can talk about that. But our goal is to make sure that everybody's cognizant, staff and students and families, in Google Classroom. One of the nice things about Google Classroom is that it's also offered, they also offer self-help tips for parents to say, how can I help at home in a Google Classroom setting? So when Fred's saying, what about resources, that would be one of the resources that we would also put, so that we can all be on the same page as best we can. We also do envision that there will be parent forums from a Google Meet type aspect, especially when we talk about what does open house look like. Open house is not going to look the same. Open house might look like a video that you tune into with your teacher in the classroom, as opposed to the family coming in at the elementary level or the secondary level. So those are all the things that, if we go back to the graphic organizer, that we have tentatively in place, ready to go once there is a decision that's made, so we can move forward properly.
Any other questions on technology or anything? So we've got about 150 questions here. A lot of them are logistical questions about, once the committee decides on whatever, how are we going to implement those things? So when Chris Howard told me to do an FAQ on the budget, we're going to do an FAQ on the logistics of whatever we choose here. A lot of them are about remote options. What happens? What's that company? My teacher wants, we should know the teacher. I'll answer those questions in the FAQ, depending on where we go here. One of the questions that did come up that I think is pertinent is kindergarten, because we built parents for kindergarten. So the theory behind kindergarten to keep full day. If parents were going to be charged for full day K, and I think David asked that question at the last meeting, we need to go 5 days a week. We will still offer half day K. And if a parent wants to go, if we choose hybrid, if they only want to send their kids 2 days a week, half day or full day, I would say half day, because I'm going to have to charge you the full day price, because that's where we're at. They can choose half day hybrid and modify their student. If they're not comfortable coming 5 days a week at half day, we can modify that. But my recommendation is to keep full day K. We have the staff in place. Those class sizes, that's the only class or kindergarten's the only number in the district that I can maintain, because I can keep kids out or I can keep kids in. We can accept kids in. Right now, the biggest kindergarten class is 21, and we're using the biggest room in those buildings. So Karen's going to use her biggest room that we, again, pressure tested, that we can put kids 6 feet apart the best way we can at a full day. Understand too, kindergarten has a little extra help with parents. So my recommendation for this committee is we keep going with full day K. Preschool's a different piece. We were mandated to do preschool. We have 40+ kids that need preschool by law, and we need their peers. So if parents want to send their kids to preschool, it's still tuition. Same thing that we did last year. If you're full day, if you're half day, it's tuition based. If we end up going remote, I'm going to ask this committee a little later on to affirm that we're going to continue to charge. Unless the committee goes remote now, then we're going to probably not do full day K, because I don't think that would be feasible for parents to pay for full day if we're all at home. But if we start school in a hybrid or in a full in-person, and we pivot to remote at Thanksgiving, we will, parents will have to pay for that tuition because I've contracted those teachers for the year. It's just something for you to think about as we go. But the other FAQ pieces, a lot of them have to do with SPED and SPED transportation, one-on-one, what's 3 feet versus 6 feet, how are my students going to get that service? We'll answer those in an FAQ as well. We still have to work that out. I can't stress enough, school is not going to be the same. And we're going to do the best we can to educate academically and socially the students in a safe environment. And finishing up the parent options. If parents want to opt out and they want to go full remote, the best I can do right now, and the district can do financially and with our current teachers, is an outside vendor. It's the state recommended outside vendors. The state has 4. George spoke about them a little bit more. We'll get those out to parents. If parents decide to go full remote, it's going to be on their time. They're not necessarily going to be in a student schedule. The full remote academic experience is not like Zoom. It's not a full classroom. You'll be on screen being taught by an educator, age appropriate, level appropriate, and again, we can define that. And the goal, if parents go remote, is we try to integrate those students somehow in our course of the school year, so that they're just not left alone on an island by themselves in their house and they have no connections. We will try to integrate them. The difference between this time and March, and I think I didn't have that revelation until early July, is we're not under quarantine. People talk a lot about the social emotional piece. Kids are playing baseball right now, kids are playing soccer, they're doing things. Whatever we choose to do as a district, that after-school component, until the governor puts us into quarantine, will still be there. So the connections made in the classroom, even if you're not in the cohort with your friend, you can still socialize somehow, parent approved, for those students. That's the major difference that I see now here. In March and April, we can come out of our houses. In May and June, it started to relax a little bit, but nobody wanted to have their friends over or do anything. That is a little bit more relaxed. So that social emotional component is important for us here to get them in, to establish a relationship with their teachers, their peers, and then no matter what you choose to do, we add the education component. But I think that's important for people to understand. We want kids back in as best we can in the safest way possible, and each district is different. There are some districts doing this, some districts doing this, and some districts doing that. I'm giving you, or we're giving you, what we think is best for our community, and what'll work for our kids in Whitman Hanson. So I'll develop this FAQ. I want to make sure the parents' questions get answered, but a lot of them were referring to my, I, me, and that's not bad. I think they're valid questions, but we'll be here until midnight if I go through the laundry list. And I think we've covered a lot, but I also don't want to miss somebody. So we'll develop the FAQ on that. Some are pertinent to Lauren, and I want her to be able to answer those questions in detail. So we'll do an FAQ. It'll be out early next week, depending on what the school committee decides tonight. So I'm open to questions. George is open to questions as we go through. I think we covered the pieces that we thought were important here, gave you some options, and now we'll hear more questions, or you can move to
We have some votes that we have to take, obviously, but we'll take questions. Mr. Cullity?
I just want to go over the hybrid again real quick this time. I'm going to the second grade.
Yep.
How's my day going to be on cohort A?
Okay.
You know, I just want to make sure we just run through each one of these levels.
Absolutely.
Sure, so is, at the elementary level, second grade for this, what's going to take place, you're in cohort A. You'd physically go to school on Monday and Tuesday. On Monday and Tuesday, the goal is that you would work with your teacher and your small cohort of cohort A in person. You would then also have, on Wednesday, you would meet with either both cohorts if the teacher decides, or your individual cohort, and that's where we're doing the continuation of our morning meeting and responsive classroom and really building that community of learners. You then have the ability then, on a structured set schedule, to then do small group academic work with the teacher at that time, noting that it'll take place in the morning hours based on if you were in school a traditional half-day. When it comes to cohort A, on the days they are not in this case, second grade on Thursday and Friday, the goal is that they would have a Whitman Hanson Regional School District elementary teacher who is working remotely to provide social studies and science. Could be two separate elementary teachers, but we would provide science remotely, we would provide social studies remotely. What this does, it gives ownership for the individual educator of their group. So they would have their group, and they would be teaching those subjects to them. It would allow for grade level standards in social studies. It would allow for multi-grade level standards in science, which is what the DESE, which is what the Massachusetts frameworks represent. When it comes to cohort B, it's the same thing, just in reverse. If you're at the middle school level, your physical structure would look the same, except when you receive, so if you're in A, you go live, half-day group on Wednesday, virtual Wednesday, but on Thursday and Friday, you would actually see, over the course of those 2 days, your 4 teachers. You would see your 4 teachers within the matrix of the time period between after lunch and the end of the school day. And you would have the ability to ask questions, do your, complete your work, because you'd also be having assignments in Google Classroom, but it would be with your teacher of record. At high school, we go to the 2 options. The 2 options for those off days, or the virtual days when you're at home, would be either live stream, so you know you get up and I have a class, and I live stream, I log on, I get that class, it's all live, we're doing it. The second would be a seminar or an extension of a portion of the class with the students in school. So again, it's your teacher of record. You would then also have your assignments in Google Classroom, which you could then ask questions of on the Wednesday and or those 2 off days.
Okay. Chris?
2 quick questions. So I like to piggyback on what Dan said. So if the parent chooses opt-out full remote, what does that look like?
So the opt-out full remote would be more of, if we're using the case of Ingenuity, let's say, the outside vendor, then that would be a course that's designed by a Whitman Hanson Regional School District teacher overseen. So, for example, if you're at the high school, we know that, let's say you have to take, and I mean, obviously I'm told that the high school people are brilliant, so if I make a mistake, I'm sorry, but you would have to take your English, your science, you'd have to take 6 subjects, 4 majors and let's say 2 electives. Within the course offerings from Ingenuity, you would be placed in the appropriate class that you would need. You would have either a curriculum coordinator or a teacher who is not working full-time in the live sense, who would simply coordinate those classes for you. So they would enroll you. They would check in to make sure that your classes are being attended. They would make sure that they set up your assignments. They would make sure that if they cancel a piece out of it because that's not applicable to what would happen if you were in school, they would do that. But it would not be teaching in the sense of, Mr. Dempsey is my teacher for this subject. It would be separate from that. As Jeff talked about, at the younger grades, there will be a hopeful way to bring those students who are fully remote in, especially at the K to 5 grade, maybe into that Wednesday morning meeting or some other time, just for connectedness, if we can do that.
Okay. And then I know you gotta kind of get to next steps. So once we get through this, sounds like you're gonna do the survey, get parents to hopefully make a decision so we can build the appropriate infrastructure around it.
Correct.
When do you think we would be able to look or have a sense of let's just say theoretically we go to the hybrid option.
Right.
There's gonna be some in-person cohort A, B class sizes. When do you think we'd have a sense of what that looks like?
So there,
Have a sense of what that-
so potential schedules are already in place. They're already there. They would have to be tweaked based on who is actually coming back. But the concept of what class looks like would be the same at an elementary school and a middle school. There is some decisions that have to be made with the high school matrix just due to movement as far as how many periods you have in a day and things like that. But the matrix of the schedule is ready to be employed. So what would happen is, it's a normal schedule at the elementary. You'd split the cohort, you have a cohort in half, and I only mean that by numbers. So let's say it's 24, you're looking at in a household situation, you try to separate 12 from 12, but then you have the concept of your school day taking place. There will be things that won't be decided until all the teachers get back, just as to how does the breakfast situation compare when those students are getting their breakfast to that student using his cubby and putting it at his locker, because now they have to be equidistant. But those things are logistic that will be worked out. But the number one thing we have to remember is you only have half the class that's there at that time.
Well, and I guess what I'm trying to make sure we follow up is, as part of the budget process, we have 4 additional teachers, right? And
Yeah.
I think it was 1 at the high school, 2 in Whitman and 1 in Hanson, whatever it was, right?
Right.
So I think we definitely owe some transparency on that. However, what I just heard was, you have no idea if X% of the population says, we're gonna go full remote, you're gonna have to do some shuffling, because that really doesn't
So
matter.
the
right?
survey's gonna go out Monday. We're expecting teacher input, who's coming back as a teacher by Thursday, and parents by Sunday night at 5. So by the following Monday, so Monday I think is the 10th, by the 17th, we will have an idea, and that's why the critical piece is when this goes out, this isn't like Survey Monkey and just, hey, I feel like doing this. We really need this information, and then we will follow up. Again, a parent can, this is what I'm going to look for in policy a little bit later from the school committee, to say, look, if you chose remote, you can't re-enter. I chose remote for September 15th, and by September 20th, I'm coming back. And then by September 30th, I want to go remote. That's going to create chaos within the individual classroom. So we're going to ask parents to really be dutiful and answer the questions that we have, and it's very simple. Are you coming back? Are you going to choose remote? Are you taking the bus or not? It's not going to be a huge, in-depth questionnaire. Same thing with teachers. Do you plan on coming back? If you don't plan on coming back, you need to schedule an appointment with us to see what options you might take under the alphabet soup FMLA, and what options we might have for you if you decide or your health prohibits you from being in school. And we will have that. I understand that from the parent perspective, and I understand it from the teacher's perspective. So by the 17th, we're hoping to have those numbers and then establish those cohorts.
This might help with some of the questions as we move. Kev, I've got about 5 questions in front of you. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, who are here or who are listening, everything that Jeff and George has presented and every question that you've asked, the governor, 3 days from now, can say, the gloves are off, ladies and gentlemen, here's what you're doing. So I just want everyone to be aware that if this spikes or this changes, as February and March happened this year and people said it wasn't going to change, we thought we were going to be out of school for 2 weeks. We can decide everything we want, but it's truly up to what happens with what's going on with COVID-19 as to changes the governor can make overnight. So these are not etched in stone. This is going to happen no matter what happens. We can say we're doing this, and all of a sudden they say you're going remote. I mean, all of this could change, and I've got Dawn, Fred, Dan, Mike, and Kevin.
Take
Go ahead,
me out
Dawn.
of the rotation.
Fred's out.
Right. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dawn.
I said, take me out of the rotation.
Oh, out, okay.
Thank you for your patience, by the way.
Thank you for the detail and the planning in this academic plan of hybrid. It is very thorough, and I like how it's outlined. My main concern in regards to COVID-19 is really taking more of a conservative and cautious approach with the hybrid plan itself, really almost slowing down the pace. So what I'm thinking is when we talk about 50% of the population on a hybrid plan, that's half of 3,800 students, right? So we're looking at 1,800 kids actually coming back in the building. So 500 high school students worries me to a bit. I'm wondering if our priority right now in your hybrid plan was pre-K and kindergarten to come back full-time. Is it possible, as I mentioned in a previous meeting, can there be a hybrid of the hybrid? So can we take the approach like Massachusetts did and phase in our own hybrid plan? So a phase-in, maybe we take 2 weeks and have the high-need students, preschool, kindergarten, maybe even first graders come in 2 weeks to 3 weeks, assess and evolve, and then bring back a next set of students. I almost worry seeing 500 high schoolers come in this building with pre-K as well, even though they are separated. They're very much contained, the preschool. So some type of rolling. I think of this as a marathon from September to June, not necessarily we've got to do all this in September. So do we look at where we are over the next 8 weeks and take it 2 to 3 weeks at a time and so forth? So this is where.
Sure, again, we can pivot on anything.
I don't know.
I have concerns about the connections. If we decide that we're going to do and this is a concern, I know other districts are talking the same thing as a slower roll-in. I am concerned that if we have a spike by October and we never get in, we're not getting in. That's a concern I have with the roll-in. I know different districts have talked about that. Speaking to a teacher, that teacher, he said he wants to see his kids to establish something. The one thing about the 500 in here, being the formal principal in here, as soon as the seniors leave, this building opens up. It's amazing how just the lack of one class keeps it wide open. And Chris is going to have a structure in place to keep them apart. I believe it'll be safe in this building. It's so enormous. If we were cramming it into a small old building, but this building has enough space to, if we're just doing 550 kids, it's going to seem like there's no one here.
Okay.
So to answer that, but that's an option for you folks. If you want us to investigate that, if that's what you choose, you can move things around here. I'm just saying what I'm thinking out loud. I hear you on that. I am concerned about that phase-in approach because that also will affect parent schedules, because I'm also looking at the parent aspect of this, saying we want our kids in school right away. I get that too. That's why you guys are in a very challenged position. So are we. So we're trying to, and I think preface it, nobody's going to be happy today. Some people will be thrilled. Some people will be really upset. Some people will just say, oh, great, that's what they decided. This was not a comfortable meeting to come to, knowing that we are going to make some people uncomfortable and have to make some decisions. And that's not a place that we would ever want to be, especially with the start of school in September. So I hear what you're saying, and I understand that careful approach. That's something to dialogue, and you guys can dialogue amongst. But it's something that people have talked about as a phase-in approach. My concern of the phase-in is if we don't see those kids, and for some reason by October or November, we're still phasing in, we might be remote for the full year. So I think that's just a concern. So again, you guys can talk that up.
Yeah, I just want to touch base one last time on, I go to, at the high school level, I'm going to have, usually you had 5 classes.
Dan, mask, please.
5 kids, classes, 5 classes during the day on the cohorts A and B. But when you go virtual on that Thursday, Friday, are they actually in a classroom or are they just expected to be doing work somewhere?
If they stream it, if we have the ability to stream it, they would be still in that classroom. If it's the ability where it is not, it would be still the work from those classes on a Google platform, and then they would have check-ins on a set schedule, not necessarily just a half hour here. If you're available, you can do it. It would be attendance, and it would be on a structured setting with their teacher of record.
All right.
I think one of the things too, if we do go hybrid, and thinking outside the box, and it took us a while to figure this out, the high school class isn't going to be 27 kids anymore. It's going to be 15. So the instructional contact time is going to be much better than when the teacher's trying to do 27 in a classroom. The elementary piece, and just looking at simple numbers, you're looking at a class of 11 or 12, at most maybe. So when I'm teaching my ELA and math, the ability to do that over a 4-hour real academic time, we should be able to do some really good things if we do this well. I mean, it's an opportunity, as George said before, to recreate the impossible and make it better. And we thought about that. So again, logistically, once we have a plan in place, then we can start the train going and saying, okay, here's this piece. The other challenge, and I'll throw out, we didn't have a budget till last week, so we were kind of doing two different things. We were going and saying, okay, what happens if we don't have any staff, and what happens if we do? So the ability of our leadership team to now move forward with a plan to really rock and roll is good. Plus, if we use those 10 days, and we don't start school until September 15th, we have some solid time as a leadership team, as a teaching group, to really hone our craft as we go into the school year.
I think it's also important that we think about those 10 days in a sense with a hybrid. For this reason, definitely, we have to get what works as far as a teaching standpoint. We have to make sure that our teachers, who are the ones who are going to execute this, who are going to be the ones in front of students, have a say in their school-based COVID plan teams to say what is best. What does the bathroom look like in a 3rd grade? What does the bathroom situation look like in a 10th grade? And I think that those 10 days provided, and then I do believe from an engagement standpoint that maybe starting full, it might be the best way, but that's your decision. I think that allows our professionals who are carrying it out to say, this is what we feel, this is what we think, and then we provide the overall tenets of the structure. So I do believe those 10 days are going to be valuable, and I do believe it'll allow our teaching force, in conjunction with the people at their school, to say, we can do this in this situation because it's half, or less than half in some cases, if people stay remote.
Mike?
Yes, thank you. Jeff, we're not voting tonight on deciding for the entire school year. This isn't set in stone. If we vote hybrid now and we hit Christmas break and we say, hey, everything's going great,
Yes.
and we merge back into a regular day.
The reason why I'm sorry, I cut you off, but the reason why we showed those 4 options at the beginning was the best option is we go back like we all have in life, and it's eradicated, vaccine, what have you, we go back. And then we have the ability to choose from those 3 models, whether it's full in-person with modification, hybrid, or remote from there.
So that could pivot, again, and one of the questions, and I'll answer that, is who requires us to change?
Right.
Is it DESE, is it the governor? Well, the governor, yes. And then, but if we're seeing that things are going well and there's 0 cases in our area, I could come back to the committee and say, we're in a good spot, this is where we're at, and we've worked this out well, we could change direction. I wouldn't say that until probably after Christmas, 2nd semester. We have heard, vaccinations and all that. I'm planning right now to get in and go. All I've heard before is that there's going to be a second spike, so I want to make sure we're ready for that second spike as well.
Conversely, DESE came out today, and they're looking at metrics, the metrics of the communities that people live in, as possibly a barometer or a determining factor as to when you might move to a fully remote or when you might come back from that. So that is something that's out there, and districts are working with the commissioner to find a uniform balance for each school district to say, we hit this or that raised or it lowered. Now that's the trigger to either leave the hybrid situation or enter a remote or to come back from that.
Can I make a motion to move towards voting for the hybrid method?
I've got a couple more. You can make that motion, Mike, go ahead.
Second, Mr. Boyce.
I hear a second.
Second, Mr. Boyce.
Seconded by Mr. Boyce. Okay, we can move into discussion, but I'm going to let a little attitude go because these guys are ready. Kevin?
We'll let Kevin and Cindy speak.
Cindy, you want to come up with them?
Sure, please.
Come on up. Come on up. It's not often I see your hand up.
All right, hi all. Certainly, what a roller coaster it's been with the whole budget, and of course where we are. We've been very fortunate to not only be on the planning meetings, both at the district and the building levels, but certainly here. And it's there's frustrating in many ways because there's more questions than answers. It changes regularly. I think, as you know, some of you are involved in the emails that get dropped by the state or DESE at 6:30 on a Friday type thing, and there's nobody there to take the call. regardless of what comes out as far as the direction of the committee, obviously, we're going to work with the leadership as far as the, the hours, wages, and conditions, and look to continue to address the kind of the day-to-day stuff, what that looks like, right? It's one thing to essentially talk as a, general, here's kind of the plan, but what are the brass tacks, so to speak? And there's certainly, as you can imagine, a great deal of, anxiety, and I think the questions start to take over as far as the what if, and sometimes the challenging piece, if you don't have clear direction from the state or somebody else, then you're kind of left for your own devices. We've done some things where we've surveyed staff, we've talked to a lot of people, kind of the general trend in the sense is, you know what, we'll make this work, we want to do what's best for kids, but there's certainly concerns over safety. I learned some information tonight that I think is going to go a long way with helping people realize, all right, what is this going to look like, right? I have some concerns when you look at, certain populations of students and the needs that we have. Can we meet those within the constraints of it? So I certainly just want to know that there are some concerns about what this will look like, although there is a sense that, hey, maybe there are some positives with hybrids. We have some things that we have to flush out, certainly with the district in the administration, but I certainly want to know that, there are folks who are concerned, right? Again, what that's going to look like from a day-to-day basis, those who, maybe can't come back because of, health reasons or otherwise, or essentially don't want to based on the fact that there's just so many unknowns. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and give you an idea that, obviously we're working with administration. We want to do what's best for, our students of this great district, and certainly the staff concerns that are there are real ones. And I'm sure there'll be more meetings and conversations coming forward. So my colleague Cindy will make a statement.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
This statement is by no means our formal statement on behalf of WHEA membership, so I just want you to know that it's coming from more of a teacher perspective. We would be remiss to think that this would speak for everyone in our membership. So that being said, we feel that many teachers in our district feel the same way based on survey data. The decision you've been asked to make tonight may be a highly unpopular one. No matter what the outcome is, it won't be a fit for every family or household. After tonight's vote, though, no matter the outcome, we need to come together as a community and move forward supporting each other the best we can to keep Whitman Hanson's students and staff safe and deliver the best instruction we can. Delivering that instruction means going back to school and being together in a classroom as much as we can while being safe. So much of the success of any given year comes directly from the community of teachers and the community they create and the routines they establish together in the first few weeks and months of the school year. Students get to know their teachers, their classmates, and expectations are reinforced, and a family of learners is forged. Growth comes when students feel connected and comfortable and empowered by this, and it happens best in person. Despite valiant efforts by educators in Whitman Hanson and educators everywhere, remote learning from March to June was not what we had hoped or wanted it to be, so we could deliver the best education. We understand that we did the best job we could with what we were given in an extremely short amount of time. We haven't been trained in online instruction. It's new and different, and the 10 days we will be given at the beginning of the year will be a fraction of what we need, but we're grateful for it and we will embrace it. And this time we know it will be better, stronger, and more effective. We can safely get back into our schools for some face-to-face time, in-person relationship building and instruction, even if it's for only a few weeks or a few days or a few months, and even if we only have student desks in the room. We believe we'll be able to deliver a better learning experience for our students. Students might not be able to see our mouths or the way our eyes crinkle when we smile at them, but they'll hear the love in our voices and will feel our positive energy. On a final note, we ask the community be patient and supportive no matter what the vote is tonight. Teaching is an unbelievably beautiful and complicated and emotional dance under normal circumstances. Mastering the steps and delivering a perfect performance takes time, and it involves trials, reflection, and modifications. We have never learned this new dance, and you will be asking us to do it in 10 days, but please know that the teachers of Whitman Hanson love the students and will do the very best we can. And just like our students thrive on on encouragement, patience, and grace. So do we as teachers, and we will learn the new dance better with your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred, you have another question?
In our deliberations, just wanted to address, in speaking with family members, they stressed how important it is to make connection with their students. And this goes from Texas to Florida to other parts of Massachusetts, people that are teachers in my family, and how important it is that first day right off the bat to make that connection. And if we were to do anything on a slower rollout, let's do full hybrid first and then maybe reassess a month or two later. But get the kids and get that connection made.
All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor. If there aren't any further questions, I'm going to move to the vote. The motion was to accept the hybrid as Jeff and George rolled out this evening. Do I have any other questions before I move to the vote? All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, folks. I think now that gives our leadership team and our teachers an opportunity to have an idea of where we're going. And that train will start. That way there too, again, I will get to the parents' questions, not trying to dodge those questions. They're good pertinent questions, but there are a lot of logistical pieces now that, since you've given me the plan moving forward, we can look at the learning management system, we can talk about different things and talk about options. Bob, did you want to take a quick stretch break? I see Mike getting up, or are we good? Face mask break? Yeah, face mask break.
That'd be great.
I just wanted to say thank you for that presentation. I mean, the amount of care and energy and effort that obviously went into that is pretty impressive. I hope there are a lot of people watching tonight, because it gives some insight into, what's required of all of us to deal with this. And just another shout out and thank you to Whitman and Hanson voters, that you guys don't have to deal with that right now on top of all this. So.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, Nick, thank you, everyone.
You guys go home.
Thank you, good night.
Are we doing a quick
Next
mask?
motion I'm looking for would be to change the first day of school to September 15th.
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Mr. Howard?
Quick question, so what does that do to the end date?
The end date? Nothing, it's 170 days.
Yeah.
Just wanted to
June
make sure.
22nd, and the goal hopefully is that if there is a snow day, it becomes a remote day.
Yep.
That's what we're looking for.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? This is on moving the start date to September 15th. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Take it like a 5-minute.
Pre-K tuition discussion, you heard from both the superintendent and the assistant superintendent about what their thoughts would be. Jeff, can you give us an idea of the dollar amount before we move to I look for a motion?
I'm not looking for a dollar amount. I don't know who's registered and who's not. All it is establishing that the committee, that we will continue to charge full-day K tuition if parents choose to enroll their kid in full-day K. Now that we're on the hybrid model, since you chose not to do the remote model, their students will come to school 5 days per week, and we will charge them. If we pivot to remote at some point, we will continue to charge them because their teachers will be delivering kindergarten instruction just better than they did last year.
Okay, I'd entertain, go ahead, John.
They will still go to school in a remote unless the governor calls
correct.
for quarantine where they can.
Then we will be making changes if that happens, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion would be to keep pre-K, K tuition the same as it is, keep it intact unless there is a change through the governor, and then we will be talking. But right now, it's just keep it intact, leave the governor out. I'm just looking for a first and a second, Fred, and we'll go into discussion.
Well, I'll make a motion, but I thought the motion should read that we are going to go into full day in pre-K, and it's going to be a non-refundable amount of money.
Yes.
Yeah, with applicable charges.
With applicable charges. The only thing I would ask is that there would be a waiver that a parent would sign If anyone has paid already and they're not comfortable, let them get a full
Okay, yeah.
refund now.
I don't think we collected anything yet.
Okay.
August 1st was the first payment.
So that way they know,
Yep.
as long as they know the rules going into it.
Yes.
That's
Basically.
exactly right. It's
So
gotta
that
be
is my motion.
Up front, so they know, and there's
Yep.
no backwards. All right, I have a motion. Somebody want a second?
Second it.
I heard a second. Is it Dan?
Yes, Dan.
Seconded by Dan. Discussion. David.
So my question, Jeff, so it's, I think 3,200 for the full year, I'm not sure.
Think so.
But, so my issue, or my concern more of, is if it goes to remote at some point and it's out of our control, parents may be upset whether they sign the waiver or not. Would it be possible to break up the 3,200 to maybe pay in increments, so if they don't continue from that point on, from when they paid, that it could go to half-day? Would that be possible?
There are multiple, we currently have multiple options as to how people pay for it. You can
Okay.
pay for it, depending if it's preschool, you can pay by session, you can pay by month, you can pay by quarter, you can pay for the year. So I would say that any person who has an issue, they usually find their way to Mary Jo Lipson in our business office, and we go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we already have multiple ways in which, even in a regular year, how people need to pay or want to pay or can pay, we try to accommodate.
The challenge, though,
Dawn?
to me, and I think I'm hearing your question correctly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Incremental ways to pay. However, if we go remote, a parent can't just choose to jump into a half-day schedule right now. And then if we come back, bounce in. Because the teachers that we have in kindergarten are paid for fully in the full-day program by tuition. So last year, we lost close to $300,000 because we reimbursed folks. I can't afford to do that this year.
Okay.
So we could always speak to a parent if they're financially in a bind, whatever, we can work out a payment plan, whatever. But I can't have people pivoting back and forth. That's the need for this. If you decide full day K, you're in full day K for the year. Even if we go into a remote setting, you're going to be delivered full day K instruction. And again, going back from March to June, it wasn't what it is going to be now. They're going to be expecting 4 hours a day of kindergarten, Zoom time, whatever, or Google Classroom time. So that's what I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it.
Dawn?
Actually, I want to clarify that question. So even if the governor determines the state goes remote, say in February,
We walked up.
we're
still delivering education, correct?
Yes, and we are still
Collecting
staying
tuition.
true to the non-refundable piece.
We'd move from in-person for that group to remote.
Yes.
And
And do
matter
you
what.
intend to do full day K screenings at some point, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
At the school,
Yeah.
based on the schedule that the individual school puts out for those students.
Somebody's locked out.
Right, okay.
Everything all right over there?
Fred?
And just to clarify, the only reason we would not offer in-house full-day K would be if the governor quarantines. If we go remote as a district,
Right.
we would
That's
still
it.
be providing that service to those kindergarten students
Correct.
within the buildings.
Correct. Yeah, for special populations, pre-K and K, yes.
Okay, so the only way
Is when the governor
that we
says-
would be going remote with these students is if the governor says quarantine, you can't go.
Correct, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
And I also, teachers will be coming in as long as
Yeah.
they can in any type of remote or whatever situation, because we want them in the building, control the narrative, control what they're doing, and have a better sense of accountability for parents and things of that nature.
Okay, so does everyone understand the motion? Do we need to have Michelle read it back? We all good? Oh, you're good?
No, I'm just saying, take a 5-minute recess and then come vote.
Sure.
We're missing Chris.
Chris had to leave to go to the men's room.
Okay. Maybe a 3-minute recess.
Take a mask break. Mask break. Spread yourselves out, take a mask break.
Fast break in the middle of the motion. That's true.
Told him he shouldn't have had Mexican today.
Yeah, crackle on a pop.
Gets so tight and all of a sudden you do that.
Oh, he's back now. Now there's a line for the other one.
I was like, wow, I'm up.
Michelle, raffle.
I was outside all day. Drank so much water.
Huh?
Have you watched the two Bruins?
No, yeah, unfortunately I did.
Listen, they got a new player. His name is Owen. Owen 2.
Yeah. So what do they get if they, but now, correct me if I'm wrong, the round robin that they're in
Is that Mike?
is, huh?
Is
that mic on?
Your what?
The microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
With his mask on.
I knew what you were saying after about the third time you going.
Yeah, hang on. Hang on, Dave.
Okay. So everyone understands we are voting on pre-KK tuition. The discussion is over. Does anyone have any further questions before I move to the vote? Seeing none, all of those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Student and staff mask wearing, Jeff, you want to?
So just quickly, depending on where policies go below, I'm going to make a recommendation to the school committee that we have mask wearing. Teachers wear masks all the time, but students, instead of DESE guidelines, grades 3 to 12, I'm making a recommendation as K to 2 as well. So K to 12 for mask wearing. I'm looking at different things from the CDC where our doctors are recommending the best barrier for this virus is masks. And if it's going to make our kids feel safe and our teachers feel safe, I'd like to implement that piece depending on whether it's a discussion later on tonight. MASC just came out with a mask policy. I haven't been able to read it. It came out yesterday afternoon. I don't know if Michelle forwarded it to you. It's not in your packet yet. But I'm looking, just that thought here for the committee and for the community out there, we're looking at a K to 12 mask wearing policy. Now, if a student can't wear a mask, that's different than a won't wear a mask, okay? It's a very big difference between a can't and a won't. And we will have students that can't, and I absolutely understand that. But I think for us as a district to wear masks K to 12, for continuity's sake, for teachers' sake, and for our parents' sake, we established that policy, or that plan. So again, I don't need you to vote on this right now, depending on whether or not the next piece gives me emergency COVID-related policy verification. So just something that was thrown out to you. We can have further discussion on that, but that's something that we've been thinking about. We ran it by our team and by Lisa, and it's something that we endorse.
Fred, do you have a question?
Yeah, have we looked into the efficacy of the, clear shields, like on a baseball cap or something of that nature for people that might not be able to wear?
Yeah, that is from talking to Lisa and from listening to everything that we have, there is nothing more effective than the mask to the mask. However, there are some We are ordering some shields for some of our special population staff, but they would still wear them in conjunction with a mask under it.
But they couldn't just wear a
Not just
shield?
the shield, because it doesn't have the coverage, because you still have the vapors and the droplets that could escape underneath the shield part of it.
But as opposed to no mask, if they're unable to wear a mask,
Right.
would that be something?
We'd have to look at that individual student and their medical or their special.
There will be some students who physically can't for medical reasons do it, but I think what we're trying to get across is that the expectation is, you get on a bus, you have to wear it. You go to school, you have to wear it. And that's where we get into the training of it. It can't be, I don't want to, or it's on my chin, or something like that.
Which brings me to my next question. Do we have a way to verify if a student says, I have a physical need to not wear? I mean, I happen to know of somebody, and she's like, oh, I'm just going to tell them that my kids can't wear them because of medical reasons.
Yeah,
know,
under
that's-
this policy, that wouldn't count unless there's a documented medical reason. Just like it's where you fill out the affidavit and the emergency card and the nurse form at the beginning of every year, and then the nurse goes to the team meetings and lets everybody know in their PLCs, it'll be the same fashion. It's difficult to just say, I can't.
We're going to follow up, and what the commissioner has really pushed us to do is follow up with parents. Parents are going to be expected to provide a mask. We will have masks here, but again, putting Lisa as a point person for communication is going to be helpful. So it's not the principal calling home unless it's a disciplinary reason. It's the nurse calling home, finding out the valid medical reason. So we don't have any HIPAA issues.
And then that gets into the counseling staff. If a child comes in every day without a mask, yes, you get provided one, but there has to be a reason why every day you can't find the mask. So that gets, where our counselors get involved with the family to try to get to the root of the problem and the education, hopefully, of the issue as to the importance and the health and safety of the mask.
So that, it was just really an FYI, unless you want to vote on
Okay.
that now, as amending a policy, putting the policy in, or the recommendation of putting that policy into our handbooks.
I'll
Thank
make
you.
that motion.
Second it,
It's nothing we need to vote for.
okay.
You don't need to, but unless you give me this, the next piece, and I'll put it in our handbooks.
Okay.
together.
We've got some policy information from MASC. It's the creation of a general intern, keyword intern policy on COVID-related issues, and it's on file with the EBC supplemental. It's in your packet. Also with it, there's an ACAB harassment update. On August 3rd, the school committee received a policy update in response to Title IX regulation changes. MASC General Counsel created a model to address the changes effective August 14th, 2020. School committees are required to adopt an evidentiary standard, either preponderance of the evidence and beyond reasonable doubt standard. An additional summary of the attached policy is adopted must be sent to parents, guardians, students, employees, union, and prospective employees of the district, including Title IX coordinator, investigators, and decision makers. The referenced employee must attend training sessions on the implementation of the policy. This is interim because it's COVID-related, and we need to vote it. I suggest, yes?
So ACAB is different than the first one.
So there's two.
One and the same?
Policy.
No, there's two.
Okay.
First
You only
one-
want to vote the second one then, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can vote on second first.
Okay, the second one is the ACAB harassment policy that I just read you.
Yes.
I'd take a motion to accept as read and printed in your packet.
I'll make that motion.
Second, Mr. Board.
Second,
Yes.
discussion. Fred?
I mean, that's the type of policy that should be going through our policy subcommittee, though.
So that was a policy that was put in through the Fed, and MASC just sent it out.
Yeah.
So we haven't been able to meet with a policy subcommittee. This has to be in our policy manual by the 14th of August.
Yeah, I mean, I read it and, you
Yeah,
know.
it's from the Fed, from our from MASC. So
Yeah.
this is a national,
But-
this isn't even a local, this is a federal policy.
I just don't want to see our policy subcommittee not be able to have the chance to vet and look at different things, even though we do pay MASC.
This one just has a date, Fred, that it has to be in there by. It's a Title IX, and a lot of people, I'm not sure if people know what Title IX means, but it's the fairness and equitability between genders of having sports. And, you have to have created offsetting sports to keep everything equal and fair, which is the way life should be. and this is some sort of a change that they made, you have to have evidence and beyond reasonable doubt, you have to have standards of practice, so.
Is this policy for, I would imagine, sports, so you can't say, like, we're gonna have.
It's a harassment policy.
It's
Yes.
harassment.
harassment policy.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so then
It's part of that.
Okay.
No, we are, that piece already there, so this is,
So that,
could be a
when I
concern.
hear Title IX, that's what I hear, like, yes, you can have football, but no girls.
But this
soccer.
also goes to harassment and all
Okay.
those other pieces. So this is, again, something the Fed put in. It was supposed to actually go in earlier. They pushed it out a little bit more. MASC came out with their draft for us. We got it. We were supposed to meet with policy subcommittee. We couldn't for you to review. Now we're at this school committee meeting, and last week was awesome, but it was a train wreck. So this has to go in. That second policy has to go in by the 14th, so I'm just looking for that to move through and put that in our general policies.
Does everybody understand what we're voting? It's the harassment policy, it's the small second piece that I read to you. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Unfinished business, Whitman feasibility.
Bob, we have to vote that first one, because there were two. The interim policy on the COVID-related issue, the supplemental,
Yeah,
just, that would give me a limited authority to make decisions outside of going through a full policy during the COVID process.
we also need to vote that separately.
Yes.
I'd entertain a motion to vote the creation of the general interim policy on COVID-related issues on file.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion. Fred, Dawn, second. Fred,
So this would be giving you that power on only COVID-related issues, and I would make the motion with the provision that the decision needed to be made before you could assemble the policy subcommittee, if it had to be a spontaneous or immediate decision, so to speak. Yeah, so.
Dawn, then you.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in giving the superintendent that power, but also, that's one of this committee's charges, is to create policy. And other than facing a time window, I would think that the policy subcommittee and then the full school committee, to be able to vote it.
Dawn?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask if we foresee any situations, in addition to the mask that you just referred to, kindergarten to 12, what type of, COVID-related policies might, are you
So if I have
familiar with?
to,
or-
I mean,
Right.
this is new.
Yeah.
This came from MASC. This isn't generated from MASS. This came from MASC. But I look at it this way. If we have to look at grading days, if we have to look at graduation pieces, if we have to look at the mask policy or amend different things, it gives me the authority to do that. It's not something I'm looking for. This is something that MASC kicked out to you guys to say, hey, look, if you can't assemble or do a subcommittee and then a policy, so if this happens on a Monday and we're not supposed to meet for another 3 weeks, when we have to do something, it gives me that authority.
I think that would be appropriate.
Chris?
So, I think so to Fred's point, this is much beyond policy, right? So for example, if we're talking about attendance or we're talking about job descriptions, those are things that wouldn't come to the policy subcommittee, they'd come to the full school committee, right?
Right.
But I do think we still are in a interesting, difficult time. So I guess what I would feel comfortable with, and whatever you guys feel comfortable with, would be giving the superintendent the authority, but any decision that he would make under this emergency provision would come back to school committee to be ratified. That way
Absolutely.
there's no confusion over this is what he did, you had to change these 5 job descriptions, because I'm just envisioning some situations where, what we talked about tonight, you may have teachers that have to help clean.
Yep.
I don't necessarily want to wait for a school committee meeting for you to make a decision like that. So I guess I would just say maybe subject to a subsequent ratification by the school committee. And if we get to the point where we don't like the decisions you're making, then we can always rescind the vote. So that's what I would suggest.
Hillary?
Yeah, I just think that so many things are gonna happen so quickly. I'm on the other side of it as a teacher myself, so like, we have no idea what anything's gonna be, so I think giving Jeff the authority to make a policy change, and I'm thinking of it from a handbook change at the high school, like making masks part of the dress code or something like that, where, you know, but I think to your point, a bigger decision, definitely coming back and having it ratified, but things are gonna happen so fast that we can't wait to make a decision about it.
Well, I think it kind of spells it out to Fred's, this is an in-turn. It says the school committee will approve the final plan submitted to DESI, which will outline its strategy for training students to school, and will, in collaboration with the superintendent, make such modifications to the back-to-school plan and district policy, and will authorize the superintendent to suspend, revise, or create protocols to facilitate the safe return to school. The policy subcommittee is never going to meet in time, and that's why it's an intern thing that kind of supersedes what I would think a policy subcommittee's doing until they meet on a final policy when DESI comes up with rules and regulations. Is that how everyone sees it?
I very fully support this and bringing it right back to the committee. You know, my concern is, you know, reading this and like, yeah, you're right, something might happen on Monday and we're not meeting we met on Wednesday and it's another month, and then I'm calling an emergency meeting because I have to change something. But everything will be vetted by you, and part of, you know, George just came in and said, a good idea would be every school committee will have a COVID-19 update, you know, on any changes that we have. And I think you guys know that if I do something anyway, you're gonna get an email or two that night. So you have an idea of what's going on, if we have to make something that I would consider policy-wise pretty drastic. I mean, that's not something I'm gonna hold under my hat, so. That's what I'm
Dawn,
looking
and then I'm going to move back to Fred's motion is. Go ahead, Dawn.
Thanks, Jeff. In thinking this through, I can just envision, maybe even at the high school, like just changing the bell schedule or allowing more mask break time or something like that. So now that I'm thinking it through.
Yep.
Simple like
That's
that.
exactly it.
Okay.
I mean, it's
So,
modifications
Fred-
during the course of the day.
What was your motion?
Well, my motion was to grant the superintendent this authority on an interim basis, as stated, you know, with the proviso, when he has to make a decision that can't wait. You know, so he has that authority to immediately act. If it's something that can wait till a policy subcommittee, and then therefore the, you know, regular committee at that point, absolutely. I would almost like to add Chris's point, if you allow me that latitude of the motion, you know, that all changes will then come to the school committee at the next meeting, you know, for ratification.
No issues there.
So I would say, to keep it simple, we should accept the document as written, because I think that document says everything you're saying, he's saying, Dawn's saying, and just accept the document as written in your packet. Does that sound correct?
What if we just do?
Because it's doing what Fred's saying, what Chris is saying, and what Dawn's saying.
Doesn't require ratification.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I don't,
We can just say approve the creation of the interim policy, and grant the superintendent authority subject to subsequent ratification by school committee.
Okay. Is that good?
That's
You happy
fine.
with that, Fred?
Fine.
Somebody seconded it?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce did.
Carletti did. Mr. Carletti.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
That was a quick arm you got.
Seeing none, all those in favor?
Thanks.
Whitman feasibility study.
So just quickly, we had a couple of updates to the building committee. So Lisa Green's on the building committee, I'm on the building committee. I am right now the chair, because I have to be, somebody had to be the chair. My goal would be to turn that gavel over to someone else at the first meeting, but for MSBA, somebody had to be the chair, so I drew the short straw. So I'm the chair right now. Mr. Tuffy's on it, Mr. Scriven, Mr. Small, Mr. Cullity, Mr. Sandlin, Mr. Curran, Mr. Grable, Crystal Regan, who's a teacher over at WMS, Mr. LaMontina from the Selectmen, Mr. Galvin from the FinCom, Don Essen, Rich Pulkinen, Dave Cadero, and Beth Stafford are members at large, and Mr. Farrell. That's the building committee. We will be meeting hopefully in early September. Want to get through August, and then we'll start that project. Mr. Grable's working on the ed component right now that we have to submit by August
31st.
August 31st. So outside of the budget, this is the other wicked exciting thing that we got going on. We were going to build a building. So we're going to start that process with these fine folks and get moving on that. So just wanted the committee to know, and I want to thank them first and foremost for volunteering to be on the committee. It's going to be a process. It's going to be fun. It's going to be tedious, and we're going to work hard, but we're going to get a building out of it.
Mr. Small has the question.
Just noticing, and perhaps this is more for Michelle even, within our packet, it doesn't show Mr. Cullity or myself as voting members, and I don't know if that's just the way the pages got.
I think it's the way the pages go.
Okay.
You're on mine.
You're all.
It dropped to another
all the
box.
members
It's
are
on-
It
voting.
drops down below.
But you are.
Okay,
They're all voting.
You're voting.
Everybody who's.
so I would have assumed, okay. Don't want to give up my rights.
You good?
I'm good.
Okay, Jeff, that new business, unfinished business?
I'm good with unfinished business. I'm all set.
You good?
Yep, all good.
New business, Mr. Small.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we, the Whitman Hanson Regional School Committee, empower the superintendent to collaborate with the Whitman and Hanson Boards of Selectmen, along with our attorney and their attorneys, if needed, to contact and work with the appropriate investigative authority, whether it be the Attorney General, the Inspector General, the DA, etc., in order to determine if there was any impropriety or malfeasance concerning the methodology of the regional school assessment over the past several years.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Dawn?
Over the past several years, is there a time period?
Just maybe 2013 forward. I mean, I think, legally you keep records for 7 years. So I think that would probably be a, good barometer, so to speak.
Okay.
And what I'm hoping to accomplish here is we would have a third party that would be looking into the assessment situation, and we can finally be able to get a unbiased assessment of what had occurred, be able to decide where we go from there, and close the door, and move forward.
Going, Dawn.
Chair,
Communities.
now, the motion mentions Board of Selectmen in both towns? I'm trying to remember.
Correct.
Have they been contacted
No.
in regards to this? Okay,
No one's been contacted yet.
fair enough.
There's been a lot of chit-chat, discussion. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, who is the third party? Are you hiring somebody to do this?
No, I'm talking about our superintendent.
Third party, someone look at it,
Well, third party and a state investigative,
call the state and have them investigate it?
yeah.
Chris?
So I'll piggyback on Mike's point. I mean, I think if we wanted to have something looked at, perhaps we should hire a third party, maybe a law firm or something that has nothing to do with this to look into it. I mean, some of the folks that you just rattled off would probably be within the scope of that inquiry, right? Whether it's boards of selectmen, other folks. So I guess if your intent is to look into this further, I'm not sure we should limit the scope to the state, and I'm also not sure it would be best to have the state do that. I think, again, maybe hiring a third-party law firm. I don't even think it could be our attorney, because they've been involved in this, so it would literally have to be a third-party law firm is all I can come up with to look into this. I don't know. I think it requires some additional thought.
I think maybe it should read, excuse me one second, David. I think maybe it should read, thinking about this, looking at it, and I'm no attorney, Mr. Small's motion maybe should read, he would like to motion that the Whitman Hanson Regional School District and the Whitman and Hanson Board of Selectmen turn over any documents to any investigative authority that might be looking into this, rather than empowering the superintendent. I mean, any Freedom of Information Act is going to get any of the documents that we might have here as a district, or that the towns might have as towns, whether it be former meetings, meetings that have been recorded, to investigate, to try to keep it third-party. Just thinking of it, I saw this earlier, and
I'm just.
I don't know, I'm no attorney.
I feel that if it goes, and I consider our superintendent to be an unbiased third party, because whatever happened before the current administration. So I would look at it as if he was a point person to work with the boards of selectmen of the two towns who have an interest in seeing this investigation through, or at least that's the chitter chatter, then that would
David's next.
that would be the way to accomplish it, along with our attorney, as well as, and our attorney represents the school committee. That's whose interest he's going to protect, as well as the town's attorneys. And they may come back to us and say, you're probably better off to hire a third-party law firm and go from there.
David?
Well, I guess,
Chris?
I don't want to say anything or overstep during the executive session, but what I will say is I don't necessarily believe that the administration would be unbiased when they would be in the scope of said investigation, and so would the Board of Selectmen. So to have them investigate each other, a third party or not, I don't see how that would be beneficial. I think maybe we should take some more time on this. Maybe we should have a separate meeting where we can kind of focus on this more, get some documentation together and kind of look into this more. I don't feel ready to make a decision like that, and I just think it should be looked into more, and we should have more discussion regarding it and what approach we can take. And I think maybe as a committee, we should make a formal vote for an investigation or whatnot before we decide who's investigating what, how's that happening, and whatnot. But yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I guess I would have similar concerns, because I'd ask, like, what's the ultimate objective of this, right?
Closure.
Right. I don't think you're necessarily going to get closure from our constituents, really, what we're talking about, if, like Chris was saying, some of these same people that are in question are involved in the investigation.
But they're not doing the investigation. It's them coupled with their attorney that would be turning whatever documents that they have over to the appropriate authority. I'm not an attorney. I'm not sure whose scope this falls under. I've heard Inspector General, I've heard Attorney General, I've heard District Attorney, I've heard all three, okay? Maybe the proper scope is an outside law firm, to do it. But what I'm saying is, I think that with the two boards of selectmen, with our superintendent acting quote-unquote as a point person to say, okay, this is what we want. Now we have our school committee attorney who represents our interest. They'll have their town attorneys, and they'll figure out who is the appropriate party. They'll turn the information over. They will start an investigation, and then they may request more documents, more documentation, etc.
Are we sure they will start an investigation, Fred?
We're not positive.
Right.
We're not positive.
Right.
I can't speak for them. I don't even know which proper authority it is. But I feel that we need to do something.
Wait a minute, Dave. We gotta go on.
No, I'm good. That's okay. Go ahead.
Are you done?
I'd prefer it to go in order rather than have us shouting back and forth, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Hillary, and then Mike, and then David.
I guess, my question would just be, what's this going to do? So I feel like that is a past problem, and understanding that I'm new to the committee and all of these things, but we voted a budget, we're moving forward, and I really think that we need to focus on the future and let the divisiveness and whatever has been happening, put it to bed. Like, I just don't think it's gonna do any good, and I don't know what good will come out of it. I mean, out of an investigation, if they could even investigate, if anyone's gonna be biased or unbiased, I mean, we don't know how it's gonna go, and I just really feel strongly about moving forward and looking to the future, and, you know, we have money now in a budget, and, you know, we're here, so can we look this way instead of this way? I mean, that's just how I feel about it, so that's all.
Mr. Jones, then David, and then Chris, I'm sorry.
Totally
Trying to
agree.
keep order.
Totally agree with what Hillary said. I'd like to move forward. Bob, has either Board of Selectmen reached out to you to start any investigation?
Neither one have reached out
Okay.
to me.
I would like to move forward.
You know, I haven't formally had the chair of the Board of Selectmen say, this is what we're going to do. David, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I guess I will note that, like a week or two ago, I reached out to the Attorney General's office just for feedback regarding said situation. They advised that we speak to Inspector General regarding it, and we go through them. To Hillary's point, I understand that obviously we've moved past the budget, we're getting towards statutory, things like that. However, the method was assessed is a thing of the past. However, the people a part of that situation aren't necessarily. There may be some people who are no longer here, but there are people related, whether it's in the school committee or the administration or the Board of Selectmen. Some of these people are still here, and some of these people were still perpetuating the issue. So I guess my concern is will we be able to move forward if the people who have caused the problem are continuing to be a part of the future discussions of whatever that may be. And to, I guess, Fred's motion, I don't really feel like we should be making a vote on this tonight. I think we should have more consideration, more time to look into it, and then kind of go from there on a decision on what we as a committee would think an investigation would look like, who would lead it, who would be a part of it, just more time to assess, because we've been focusing so much on COVID recently. How can we really look into this and make the proper decision? I just feel like voting now in favor or against it won't do us any favors, because we haven't had really time to look at it or focus on it.
Chris, thank you.
I understand, you know, your thoughts on this, but I guess from my perspective, it's an issue that's been ongoing, and it's been in the background, and I feel like it's really something that involves our credibility as a district and as a committee. And this issue, people have been aware of it. I've had selectmen from both towns talk to me directly about it in terms of the need for accountability. I'm not looking to do anything unnecessarily, but at the same time, we have a current situation going on that we dealt with in executive session, that if we don't deal with it, I think it's going to do more harm to us in the long run. And I'm thinking in terms of building back programs for our district and being able to communicate effectively with the constituents and getting their support. And if there's this underlying tone of unaccountability or mistrust in us or the district in general, I think that's going to be detrimental to our efforts. I've said from the beginning that I'm all about us as a committee laying it out. What are our concerns, if any? Let's figure out a way to deal with it as a committee and move forward in that direction, whatever that, however way, shape, or form we decide to do that. But I think passing over it in hopes that it will just go away and we'll be able to move on, I just don't see that as a likely scenario, and I think it's going to end up hurting us in the public perception, I guess.
Dan?
Tell me if I'm wrong. What Fred is looking for isn't about budget and what methodology was used. It's about what happened along the way of either deceiving, hiding, doing whatever in the past. Yeah, we can't go in the back and fix any of that, but like what Chris is kind of like saying over here now, we can't ignore it. And like we've learned in the past, you have to find your history to make sure you don't repeat it. That's what I think Fred is trying to do, is get somebody to investigate this, find out where the mistakes were made, where they, to make sure nobody can hide things. When you're asking somebody a question and they're coming back with different answers, that's, you're deceiving us. We have to make sure we can have that found, if possible, and close it forever. Then we learn we have a method here. Well, let's make sure this never happens. Let's put a procedure in place that this can never happen again moving forward. Where somebody, because we lose the trust of the community. Like Chris is saying, we want to be able to get things back, and if we're up here and it makes it look like we're hiding stuff, you're not going to get the support of the community full out. It can't hurt to ask for the IG to look into it.
Mike?
No.
You were next, no? David? I'm sorry, Fred was actually next. I'm trying to keep track. Fred, David, Hillary, Chris.
And Chris, I want to thank you for getting inside of my head and organizing a lot of my thoughts, because that's how I do feel. I do feel that it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. It's the dirty little secret or whatnot, and transparency. And if we're going to be able to move forward as a district, and we're going to be able to enhance what our budget provides, yeah, we have money this year. We have money just to maintain our services, and that's it. We still don't have the foreign languages. We're still not doing the job we really should be doing. And with the COVID world, God knows what that even will look like or should look like. But I think that we need the closure in order to be able to move forward and regain the public's trust in us, because I think that there is a lot of mistrust. So I do want to thank you for getting inside my head and sort of organizing my thoughts as well.
Dawn, I think you're in the mix there too. Dave?
Whenever.
David, go ahead. And then Hillary, and then Chris, and then Dawn. I'm sorry, Dawn.
Well, I just want to begin that if there's anyone that's been advocating for an investigation since day one, it's been me. I've been looking into this matter since before I even got elected. So to your point, Dan, I agree, there needs to be an IG involved. However, my concern with Fred's motion would be to have the administration and selectmen and whoever else involved with this investigation to lead the way. I don't think that's particularly right. I don't think we've really had enough time to go over this and assess all of our options and what that would look like and what that would entail. So I think making a vote right now would just be a kind of a haste decision. We need to look into it more. I mean, we spent the day 3.5 hours talking about COVID, and now we're going to go into this. And also, to top it off, I can't even speak about the contents of what's going on because of executive session. So I feel kind of silenced. I don't feel as if I can advocate exactly what I'm trying to tell you guys, because I don't want to overstep and speak about executive session. So I do feel like this matter should be moved, and if we want to talk about it further, we should make those minutes public so I can talk more, and then we go from there, because I have a lot of concerns, but I don't agree with the process to go about it. I agree there needs to be an investigation. I've said that for months. I said that before I was elected. I'll say it now. There needs to be an investigation, either the AG or the IG, whomever. I do think the state needs to be involved. I just don't know if I necessarily agree with your process, but I do respect your need for an investigation, because this isn't something we can keep in the past. This isn't still in the past. There's people still involved with what has happened in the past, and they're currently a part of our future now. So it needs to be looked into, and then again, to Chris's point, how can we trust the committee? How can we trust the district? How can we trust our elected officials in either town if the matter isn't looked into? But again, I just don't necessarily agree with how we approach it. So I think we should maybe have an open session or something where we can kind of discuss it more, talk about it more, have it on the agenda, kind of spend more time on it. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm not necessarily knocking off your motion. I just would like to spend more time on it, look at it more, and assess it more.
And if I can
Hillary?
address...
No, I'm going to go in order, Fred. Hillary? Chris? Dawn? Fred?
I guess I understand, Chris, to your point, that there is mistrust in the committee, and I guess, I just don't know where that's come from. I mean, when we have school committee members posting about our administration on social media, I think that that's an easy way for mistrust to come. And I guess the thing that I keep going back to is, what good is this going to do, right? And I don't know, I hear what you're saying about the mistrust. I just don't know if an investigation and then nothing comes of it. Or, you were saying 2013 because we keep our records. Well, our current administration was not in their positions in 2013. So we're pointing fingers at people who might not be responsible, and that's causing more mistrust. And my big thing is divisiveness. I'm not necessarily saying that's what your motion is. I'm saying the conversations. I just think that the divisiveness is not going to lead to good. And that's just where I keep going back, because I think that's what this is going to do. And I do hear the points, but I just think maybe, hold it, think about it a little more, wait for something else. But I don't know that it's going to cause good. I think it might do more harm than good, and I don't think we need that.
Chris. So I'll preface this by saying I think there's nothing more important than public transparency, right? I think that is critically important. Having said that, I do think perhaps we should consider, because there are some legal things that have already transpired that we absolutely need to take into account, that perhaps it may make sense to have an executive session and include perhaps the boards of selectmen so that we can all talk about this once and for all with the restated concept that the public needs to know where we land. But I think it's important to just get it all out. I think there are some things that have already transpired that I'm not sure we can necessarily do that publicly easily. So I'm almost wondering if there's a way for us, because again, I've heard a piece of, this selectman thinks this or this selectman thinks this. I don't know if they're speaking or representing the boards. And I think that's really important in this process. We've said we need to make determinations as a committee. I think the various boards need to make determinations as a committee, and it shouldn't just be one person speaking on behalf of a particular board. So I don't know how we maneuver forward, but there may be an opportunity to just get everyone together and just talk through it with the understanding that when we're done, we owe it to the public to be transparent. I don't know how to have this conversation and get everything out on the table publicly without there being legal ramifications, which I think is our obligation to understand. And I also think at the end of the day, if we're going to conduct a third-party investigation, let's say we go to the Investigator General, what is it, IG?
Inspector General.
And they say no. So are we stopping? Because if we're going to continue, now we're going to use taxpayer dollars to do this. So I would think that we should probably have consistency between the school committee and both board selectmen. If we're going to spend taxpayer dollars to do this, we probably should think through how we're going to do it. So again, I don't know if there's a way to get there, but it may be worth doing some outreach. And if there's a way to do this without violating our legal obligations publicly, great. I don't know if we can do that, in which case I would suggest maybe we all come together for an executive session, hammer it out, and then share with the public where we landed. My 2 cents.
Dawn and Fred?
Sure. So along the lines of wanting to move forward, of course I do. I also want transparency, as Mr. Howard said. And I asked the timeline to Fred, because I think in order to move forward, you need to know where we've been. And the real story is starting back, and it may sound strange, but going back to 1984. And that's when a group of Massachusetts citizens began the push for the Education Reform Act. I'll give you a really quick story, but we signed our regional agreement in 1991, and the Education Reform Act from 1984 transitioned and became law in 1993. There is documentation that there were 14 towns. Whitman and Hanson had residents and students who were part of that charge in the 80s. It rolled over. There was another 2 families. Whitman Hanson was part of this Education Reform Act. So the transparency part that I want explained is that when last year and the year before, and this is not to our administration, but to the towns, we never knew. We never knew about this, but yet somewhere along the lines, these 2 towns had families, were a part of this landmark legislation in 1993. And then in 2007, this memo. we also have in our district policy online is the budget and the apportionment of expenses. At some point, this school committee approved a policy that included the statutory method. It is online. So I'm not saying that it's maybe anyone on this committee or not, but this was here at some point. So this is information that I have learned and I have questions about. So I hope that we can, as Hillary said, move forward with the district, but at the same time, solve these questions, answer these questions.
Fred?
And I'll just give a little brief synopsis. We had a regional agreement committee. You sat on it with myself and Chair Hayes back in 2017. You have Mac Reed, I believe it was, from Mars, who was, we hired them to redo our regional agreement because we were told as a committee it needed to be cleaned up, and we're supposed to be doing that every 5 years. You have him making a statement in that meeting, talking to the administration, talking about your assessment situation, and we need to have another meeting on that. Okay, and then magically, the assessment, the apportionment of costs has changed in the agreement. I never picked up on it. Chair Hayes never picked up. You never picked up. I think Bob Trotter, was Bob on that committee?
Bob was on, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I'm not positive. You had Hanson selectmen, you had Whitman selectmen, you had FinCom members. Nobody picked up on it. Okay, and now, knowing what we know now about the statutory method, because I don't think it was ever a word in our vocabulary back then, and you look at these meetings and you really start scratching your head. But we're not the only ones that are looking at these meetings. The public is looking at these meetings and saying, what the heck is going on? And that's why we need to get to the root of everything, find out what happened, make sure it never happens again, be able to close the door so that we can do what's best for kids, because that's what we're here for. I think that this accomplishes it. And the superintendent, the reason why I named him is simply because he's the one that can contact the attorney, get the attorney in with the town of Whitman, town of Hanson, and their attorneys, because it'll be the attorneys that will assemble everything. All right, to David's point, they won't be doing the investigation. The investigation will be done by a completely separate party. Should we do it with, and just hire a law firm? I'd rather see us try this first and not have to spend the money. If that's a legal resource that's available to us that won't cost us, at the same time. And that's what runs through my head. But I have no doubt in my mind, once it gets turned over to a state authority, and that's the ultimate goal of what this motion is, then they're the ones that are doing the investigation. And they're going to uncover, if there's something to uncover, they're the ones that are doing it. It doesn't matter that we're involving selectmen, etc. We're using that as a channel, okay? We owe it to our partners to be involved, all right? But then we turn everything over, and it goes to a state investigative agency. They're the ones that will look into everything. That's pretty much what I got to say.
Well, I think, Fred, you answered, go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just think it's a pretty complicated issue. And this, your motion came up last minute, and now here we are discussing it, but I think we owe it to each other, the committee owes it, we owe it to ourselves to give this some real solid, thought in how we're going to proceed, because it's a pretty delicate situation. So I would, recommend that we hold off. I like Chris's idea. regarding executive session, bringing in both Whitman and Hanson, boards of selectmen, lay it all out there and see what we want to do as a community. And I don't, I just think we're rushing into something without really thinking it through and all the ramifications and possibilities.
Under the open meeting laws, this is the way we need to proceed, though.
I don't think so at all. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think I think that's a perfectly legitimate avenue.
Well, you can motion to table my motion as opposed to voting on it, I guess, but
Yeah, I just don't think it's our only option, Fred, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's the best option at this point.
okay, we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And you, like I said, if you wanted a motion to table it,
I don't know if motion to table it, Fred, a statement you just made kind of summed up the whole situation. You said that Mac Reed was at a meeting and he mentioned to you, me, Bob Trotter, everybody at that meeting, finance committee members, selectmen who were on the committee, lawyers who voted it every year, and no one knew or ever heard of statutory. I think you answered the whole question. Who covered up something they didn't know about?
when Mac Reed said that I have to talk to you about your situation to the prior administration, okay, that's what occurred if you watch the meetings. Okay, so that's what he said to the prior administration, and then the language was changed right thereafter.
Okay, but I'm saying, as far as the rest of us.
Right, the rest of us, it went right over our heads.
Okay.
Well, so Bob, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Chris.
So through you to Fred.
Go ahead.
What recourse, what actions can the Inspector General take against the district or the town?
I have no idea. I don't believe any.
Are you certain?
Not sure.
So, again, the way, and forgive me because I'm going to bring some bias here, the way I was always taught was when you're dealing with regulators and authorities, it's always better to get your own house in order and figure out and clean it up than to ask the state to come in and do it for you.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, sometimes you're subject to penalties, fines, etc. So there's one thing to say, hey, we should look into things and fix it. Wholeheartedly agree. It's another thing to say, hey, we're going to bring the state in, and I don't know, can they levy some fine against the district? Because how is that going to help our kids? It's not.
I would like to.
I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that with some degree of certainty before we just, again, bring something upon ourselves that, to Chris's point, is maybe a little premature and not well thought out. Again, I'm not against looking into things, and I'm not against being transparent. I am against doing something really fast just to do something and it not being the right thing.
Good, Fred.
And I can see your point, but I disagree. I think that we need to move forward. I can't see them leveling anything against us for asking them to help us find if there was an issue.
Well, I've had experience directly to the contrary of that in another line of work.
Okay, is there anybody else? Because I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Small. And it was seconded by Mr. Cullity. If there's nothing else on the floor, I'm going to move to the vote.
I'd like to make a motion to table it.
I'm sorry, Chris?
I'd like to make a motion to table it.
I have a motion to table it. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by David.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Discussion.
I think we already had it. I think it's, we should just give it some more thought. We owe it to ourselves and all the parties involved to give it some more thought.
Okay. Anyone else? Nothing else? All those in favor of the motion on the floor to table it? All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. This is tabled until further dated another meeting. We will bring it up. Thank you. Okay. Executive session. The chair declares the public body will convene an executive session to review and approve executive session minutes. The public body may convene an executive session under the original purpose for the executive session, or it may convene an executive session pursuant to general laws, small c, 30, large A, 20, small a, 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general law or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Purpose number 7, citing open meeting law, general law, small c, 30A, 22, small f, small g. The chair stated the only vote taken coming out of executive session will be to adjourn. I make a motion, and it has to be roll call to go into executive session to review and approve executive session minute.
So moved.
Go into executive session?
Hillary? Roll call vote, yes or no?
Sorry. Yes.
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 Ian?
Yes.
Mike? Bob Hayes, yes.
Yes.
Dan? David? I gotta move you to a...
Just turn his name around.
You're right.
Yeah, there you go. Dawn?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Scriven? Okay, we are in executive session, and as I said, we will be coming out only to vote to adjourn.
Is it off? Is the cable off?
No.